Well, good evening again, everybody. Welcome back to DriversEye Live. It's Wednesday, and that means it's time for the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. Happy to have your company as always. I am Brendan Kazmarek, joined again by Joseph Moodrock, our producer for tonight. Hello, Joseph.
Hey, Brendan.
Happy to have you along for the most part. And on the third microphone is Scott Michaels. Hello, Scott.
Evening, Brendan. Evening, Joseph.
So we've been with you for the last 3 Wednesdays now. This is week 4, and scored through the 5-race championship that makes up the Invitational eSeries for USAC Karting. If you haven't been with us from the beginning, most of the drivers in the field participated in the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando, either last year or this year, and sort of providing us some entertainment for our Wednesday nights. 2 30-minute sprints, and this week we visit Road America up in the hills of Wisconsin. Scott, we've been to Lime Rock and we've been to Laguna Seca, both notably shorter than Road America, each with their own kind of unique challenges. Road America is very much a different animal.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only in length, as you alluded to, should mean that we get even less lap traffic than we had at Laguna, which was I think that was helpful for the whole field, having less mixing of faster and slower cars, at least not so early on in the race. But then also in the style of track, there's very few combination corners at Road America, a lot of heavy braking and therefore heavy acceleration on the other side. So there's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how these guys master driving GT3 cars, specifically with ABS and traction control systems. It's quite a nuanced skill set to pick up, and it could change sort of balance of power in the field, who's fast and who's less able to master that. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens based on that.
I think as we saw over the last couple of weeks, traffic played a big role in the outcome of all 4 of the scored races we had. Maybe not so much at Okayama during the preseason, but I think we're likely to see a return to what we saw at Okayama, where we're not seeing such massive influence in the overall outcome of the race like we saw, at some of the shorter tracks. So with any luck, as close as the front of the field has been, and as good as the racing has been, I think we're probably likely to see something more like we saw in the preseason, which is not at all a bad thing. I'm particularly looking forward to tonight's 2 30-minute sprints. No pit stops, no fuel addition, no tire changes, just 30 minutes, green flag, check the flag, and each victory over the course of the season results in a $100 discount to the team entry at the 24 Hours of Orlando, SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando, sometime in 2021. Qualifying beginning here in just over a minute and 7 seconds to go in the practice session. As always, we've had our pre-qualifying for the week, and we didn't quite fill up room 1, but anybody who set a time on the last couple of nights here on iRacing will be eligible to start tonight in room 1. Anybody who isn't, there will be a room 2 set up for those who were sort of late to the party. But for the moment, it doesn't like we're going to have any of that overflow. This will be just a good opportunity for those who are committed for the full season to be a part, and those who maybe came in a little later or haven't been able to feature in Room 1, at least so far, to be a part of the big show, so to speak. So we'll get into the championship picture as the evening goes on, but Scott has been sort of taking a look at where we stand after 2 out of 5 races. And if you could, Scott, as we get ready to qualify here, just a quick synopsis.
Yeah, so overall lead at the moment on pure points is Alex Gomes, who's had by far the most consistent run through the 4 races so far. And I think we can all agree he's been one of the benchmark operators so far. We've had 3 or 4 drivers really clearly at the front on pace. They haven't all had the luck, but Gomes has got the closest to putting together what would look like a championship run. But the interesting aspect of this championship is that we have 2 drop rounds to consider, 2 drop races, sorry, to consider. We are, I might as well mention it now, we're adding another round to the championship. So we're actually going to Road Atlanta next, I believe. I'll let Brendan confirm that later, and then Indianapolis later. So it will be the full championship is going to be, I think that makes it 6, am I right? So that will be 12 races. which means that the 2 drop rounds isn't quite as important as it would have been if we'd left it at 5 rounds and therefore 10 races, but it's still something we need to take into consideration. So if we take that into consideration right now, Alex Gomes' current championship run isn't as strong because it's so consistent, but with I don't think he's had a first or a second all season so far. So actually, if we drop the 2 rounds now, which is sort of not particularly relevant because there's a lot of things that can happen through the remainder of the season, but if we do drop the 2 rounds right now, Reed Sweeney actually leads the championship because he's had a first and a second. And then other drivers who are much stronger than their current championship position look are Brendan Baker and Nick Rowland. Nick Rowland obviously dropped a lot of points in race 2 at Laguna Seca when he had a crash with the back marker and DNF'd. So it's really those 3 are kind of looking particularly strong in the championship right now. We've got obviously Alex Gomes. And I forgot to mention. No, I did mention Reed Sweeney as well. So we've got Alex Gomes, who really needs to just start racking up wins and scoring big points because he's got enough banker rounds so far with decent point scores that he can fall back on if he does have a disaster, that it's worth taking a few risks from here on out. And then on the other end of the scale, we've got Reed Sweeney and Brendan Baker, who can't afford a bad round now because they've already had 2 bad rounds. So that's kind of an interesting way of looking at these next few races today. We also have strong drivers in the championship like Blake McCord, who's in a pretty similar position, I think, to Reed Sweeney, just slightly lower on points. So if he starts getting podiums through the rest of the season, he'll definitely be a contender. But yeah, those are the guys to look at this point in the championship, and obviously we'll revisit after today.
Yeah, like you said, Scott, I think the operative point to make there is that anything can happen. We're 4 races in out of 10. It'll stay a 10-race championship. Just 2 weeks to go after tonight's dual sprint. But it gives us an opportunity to focus in on the relevant players at the top of the field, like you said, Alex Gomes and Nick Rowland, Reed Sweeney, Brendan Baker, being certainly all among them. We've started our qualifying session. As always, it's a 10-minute session, 3 time laps available to all of the drivers, and as it's been one sort of bad lap or one incident, such as an off-track or a 0x contact, will invalidate the lap. So not so much an issue here at Road America. Track limits, big wide curbs on a lot of the exits, and we'll see if we're slow enough that you don't need to go 2 cars widths over the curbs as you come off the apex. But in any case, you'll try and set a decent lap straight off the bat, get a banker time, and carry on.
One driver I've seen already screw up their first lap is, I think, a new name for us, Vincent Clement. Spun at turn 1 on his first time lap, so that lap will be invalidated and he'll have to go for lap 2.
Currently riding on board with Alex Gomes in the red number 64 Mercedes AMG GT3. We don't have the sectors at the moment, but he's coming through the kink now. It's quick lift of the throttle in 5th gear, grab 6th gear on the way out. You just sort of very lightly ride that exit curb and then set it up for hard braking into Canada corner. Like you said, Scott, it's really all about managing the ABS and the traction control, using the driver's aids to the best possible effect without costing you acceleration time as you come back on the throttle through the left-hander under where the old bridge used to be, and then into the right-hander at turn 14. Try and square it off just enough, come back in the throttle really hard and ride the curb on the exit. All 4 wheels onto the curb, 2 wheels into the pavement behind there, and Alex Gomes up the hill under the NTT Data Bridge and across the start-finish line for a lap time of 2:05.843, immediately eclipsed by a second by Nick Rowland in the Audi R8 LMS for Satellite Racing. Very nearly a full second there, a 2:04.877 for the number 67.
I was following Nick Rowland through that lap. It looked tidy. Didn't look like he was particularly pushing the limits, so there could be a little bit of margin left in there for Rowland. But yeah, very tidy, good banker lap, so that puts him in a very strong position to get pole position here.
Reed Sweeney sits in 3rd, another one of the championship players, 2:06.007, so right on the 06 flat marker, just ahead of Andrea Zellini. Blake McCord is 5th, Q North 6th. All have sort of played around, been a factor inside the top 10 for most of the races we've had so far in the USAC Karting Invitational eSeries. And then once you get out of the 206s there behind Blake McCord, you're into a bunch of drivers deck in the 207s. Trevor Andrisco is there. Jason Drescher just on at the outside of the top 10, sort of looking in. But like we said, 2 more laps to go, 2 more time laps, and just about 4.5 minutes of time left on the clock.
Interesting to pick out Jonathan Patterson in 8th place. I think he was one of our drivers who qualified into race 2 at Laguna through Room 2. So 8th place is a pretty impressive performance from him. If I've got that right, I might be remembering things wrong. But yeah, he's...
No, I think that is right, because I remember that paint scheme. I don't think he's changed it yet.
So yeah, good effort from him. See if he can improve on lap 2, of course.
Following Jonathan Patterson, Mercedes through the kink and then onto Canada corner. He was a little on the just to the right, I think, of where you'd want to be exiting the kink, but it doesn't take much to have to pay more than you can handle on the exit of the kink there. If you miss the apex just a little bit or you carry too much speed through the apex, there's a chance you're going to drop a wheel. And if you've got the car loaded up still, as you just clip the grass on the backside of the curb, it can, well, ruin not just your lap, but ruin your night, really.
A few more drivers having incidents. Josh Olds had a big crash at the kink on his 2nd lap. Austin Olds is the other driver I'm looking at, who has managed to rack up 11 incident points so far in this session. He's just lost his lap 2. Sorry, no, I think that was his lap 1 that he's just, so maybe he was racking them up on the outlap, but he definitely just lost his lap 1, and he's come out of the pits again to have another go. But yeah, he's having a bit of an adventure in this session. Hopefully he can clean that up and get 1 time on the board here.
Really marginal improvement for Alex Gomes the last lap. He, having set a 2:05.843 the last time, just did a 5.812. So only shaving about 0.03 of a second off. And when you've got more than a second margin up to number 67 of Nick Rowland, you're asking for an awful lot that probably isn't going to be on the cards for lap 3.
And yet, he's the only other driver below a 2:06. So this pace from Rowland is extremely impressive.
And this is what we've seen over the course of the season, Scott, where Rowland has been really, really quick and really, really consistent, but just been caught up in some really kind of lousy luck, both in the second races at Lime Rock and then again last week at Laguna Seca.
Another driver worth picking out who has had an incident point on their first lap is Matt Strand, who's usually a top 10 contender. He's only lap 2 now, so he seems to be fully lit, so I'm guessing he hasn't wrecked it yet, although he has just spun in the kink, so that's Matt Strand wasting 2 of his qualifying laps. He'll have to reset and
he won't have time for a third.
Jason Drescher, another crash, that's in turn 13, right towards the end of the lap.
Here's Nick Rowland coming up the crest to finish his last lap, I think.
Not that it's necessary, but we'll see if he can improve again.
Not quite. 800s off.
So still, by far the fastest lap of anyone not called Nick Rowland. But yeah, I think it can be fairly safe to call him our pole sitter, I think. How long have we got to go in the session? 1 minute? Yeah, so Matt Strand isn't going to get around to even start his final attempt. So he'll be starting from the back. That's going to be really interesting to track how he progresses from there.
Yeah, we could have our first breakaway here by the looks of things, because he's going to have such a big margin. I mean, as you can see on the timing tower, he's got a huge margin to Reed Sweeney, who I didn't realize he just sat second.
Yeah, that's another driver into the 205s. That makes 2, Sweeney and Gomes. The only other thing is that we hadn't really mentioned as a characteristic of this track is it's obviously slipstream is going to be a really big effect. So
Sure.
You have to be a lot quicker to break away from any drivers or groups of drivers chasing. Of course, with it being kind of a track which invites a good dive bomb, we could find that on the first lap there's a lot of moving around and position changing in the sort of 2nd through to 5th range, which might cause that gap to break open, and that would allow Nick Rowland to just escape and drive away into the sunset. But if Reed Sweeney, Alex Gomes and James French stay roughly line astern and sensible, they shouldn't really have much of a problem, only being just under a second slower with making that time up using the slipstream. So we should see quite a close race still, but we'll have to keep an eye out for that. If that gap opens at all, it looks like Rowland's definitely got the pace to stretch it out from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think your strategy hinges on anyone being sensible, which we've done plenty of races that are dominated by, for example, like every Skip Arbor race, right?
Yeah.
Everyone decides that they would be the person who would be the strongest at the head of the pack, and therefore they should pass everybody. And so that pack
Well,
never
you say that, but these are
materializes.
karters, and that is a classic karting tactic: is to realise that we've got a long race ahead of us. You want to keep yourself in the running for the win. It doesn't really you are as long as you're roughly in, I guess, the top.
Yeah, as long as you're basically in the fight.
You away for second place on lap 2 or 3, get second place, but the leader's 5 seconds up the road, and you haven't got the pace to catch him, then the win is gone. So hopefully these guys will be able to keep that in mind. Definitely to look out for on the first lap, and that's going to be an interesting part of the strategy. The other possibility, as we can see from the helicopter shot that we're looking at now on the start-finish straight, is that it's the only part of the track that's extremely narrow, with the pit wall right there on the right. And with these rolling starts, it absolutely in massive pile-ups, just because there's not a lot of space. If one of these 30, trying to see how many drivers are actually qualified, is something in the region of 30.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah. Something like 35. If one of these 35 drivers makes this mistake, maybe tries to push a 3 wide a bit hard because somebody else doesn't get the start they were hoping for, we can end up with a mass pile up. So we'll have to hope that doesn't cause these fissures in the middle of the pack as well. I trust, he said, not confidently at all, I trust these top 5 or 10 from his first yeah. Try and pick out anyone particularly worth looking for. So front row is Nick Rowland and Reed Sweeney, saying nearly a second between those two. A really impressive lap there. Well, set of laps really for Nick Rowland. He backed it up with more to it. Reed Sweeney, as I was in our build-up, is currently on dropped rounds. Our leader with a first and a second place at Laguna Seca. A really great run from him. Row 2 is led off our resident pro from the pack. Is Zadie managed to get away with that. Might have to look at the weaving rules on the pace lap for future, because it's not Austin Olsen's car in front of him, it's Josh Olsen, who, as I mentioned, had a bit of an event in the qualifying session as well. Is now struggling with connection issues. But anyway, yeah, we got our resident. Is it IMSA Pilot Challenge? Is that what James French races?
That sounds right. I swear I've seen him in. I don't know. I'm gonna misattribute the class to him, because like in my mind I associate him with LMPC. I have no idea if that's right, and that was also forever ago.
Yeah. I feel like he's bounced around a lot. I'll keep your mic's struggling a little bit, Joseph. I don't know if there's anything you can do.
I assure you, it's my computer.
Either way, so row 3, Andre Azzolini, who's been a fiery character, shall we say, for the last, very confident moves, shall we say, on the brakes, and this is a perfect place to be doing that. So yeah, we'll keep an eye out for more of them. He's with Blake McCord, who's been the opposite. He's been our race 2 up win. The next row is led up by Ryan Thomas, and then Alex Slupski is in the perfect place to pick up another reverse grid pole. He's starting 9th, so if he can survive and stick there. Something to keep in mind as well, that battle for 10th place, because that will be pole position for race 2. The top 10 will be reversed. 11th is Jonathan Patterson. He qualified in through for race 2 at Laguna Seca through room 2. So that's a great result for him to get, and nearly breaking the top 10 in qualifying here. Then we've got Gavin Bailiff, which is, I believe, is a new name to me. Either that or he hasn't been in trouble in the top 10 recently. And Wes Dushak, who is, I think he might be our top rookie qualifier again, which he was at Laguna Seca. And we've got Dan, who has managed to get the man.
Obviously his legal name.
Yeah, apparently. That's what iRacing has taken. So we'll leave the rest of the group for now as the leaders come up. And Nick Rowland goes immediately as the pace car pulls off. He didn't even give me a chance to tell you that we're coming up for the green. But yeah, good start from Nick. That probably is going to be helpful for the entire field, getting everyone strung out nicely, avoiding the issues I was alluding to that could happen.
Yeah, no issues you can see coming down into turn 1. So this is shockingly clean.
That's really good to see. So yeah, Nick Rowland leads from Reed Sweeney and Alex Gomes and James French. A little bit of a fight between, I think that's Ryan Thomas further back in the field. He's backed out of that move. Hugh North, though, is making a move on, I think that's Blake McCord. But they've also got themselves back in line as we run down to turn 5.
Yeah, they may actually be lining up. They may just be trying to keep Nick in their sights, although it looks like Reed's making a look toward the inside. I don't think he's going to take it.
We've got a crash further back at turn 5, and it's actually Hugh North and Blake McCord, so it was exactly the battle I was looking at just before they came together. Blake makes a really dodgy re-entry in front of Tyler Hoffman, but they just about get away with it. Let's see what caused that. If I can look back at my own replay, it was just Hugh North not anticipating Blake getting on. Blake was defensive, but he got on the brakes at a reasonable point, and Hugh North just was not leaving enough margin there. So that's a real shame. Everything else, though, does appear to be clean, except that we've now got a crash going down to turn 8. About 3 or 4 cars spinning off. Doesn't look like anyone hit anything too hard. We've got Max Coles as one of the cars involved.
I think it's worth keeping an eye right now on Alex Gomes, and just let's watch and see what he does. If he decides that he wants to take a stab at second, or if he trusts Reed Sweeney enough to try to tow him up to Nick Rowland.
Further down, Blake McCord unfortunately has had another spin in the carousel, this time on his own, and he collected Max Calder, who had just had a crash in the previous corner as well. Hugh North took a trip through the gravel too. A lot of crazy stuff going on at the back of the field. We've got a
it looks
big
like something's
crash.
happened to Chance Kelly potentially.
Yeah, he's the Pride car that was off there.
Okay.
But we move back to the front of the field. It looks like Nick Rowland's made the clean break that we were wondering if we were going to see. And that should be enough of a gap to get away from Reed Sweeney and Alex Gomes. In terms of like breaking the slipstream, anyway.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think if Nick can avoid trouble from
number 34 has taken a trip through the gravel at turn 1. That will have dropped him out of, I think he was in 7th place at the time.
That's right, yeah. He's got,
That's a shame to see. Jason Drescher just turning across the front of Wes Dushak. Wes had completely recovered, and Jason obviously assumed that he'd cleared him before turn 3, but hadn't. They've kind of got away with it, but yeah, it's a little bit of inexperienced looking driving by Jason there, just turning across far too soon.
Yeah, let's keep an eye. You can see the gaps among the top 3, and so that doesn't look particularly close right now, although we'll keep an eye on it. Slightly closer appears to be the battle here for 7th. I say slightly, and I think it is slightly, because it's only about a half second between Reed Sweeney and Alex Gomes. So let's pop over to that for just a moment.
Yeah, the field is kind of, at least through the top 10, has definitely spread out more than I would have expected. So, not so much to talk about there.
No, it's actually been really tame. I was expecting a lot more chaos.
We've definitely had chaos in the back third of the field. If I just flick through, we've got Chris McCoy in the number 24, has a bent front end. He's one of the first cars. He's running 19th, one of the first cars with a little bit of damage. A few guys like Hugh North and Tyler Hoffman is off in the grass, number 43. I think that's at turn 3. He might be giving up from there.
That's what it looks like, yeah. Let's go back to Jason Drescher, because it looks like he's going to make another lunge at West Dushak if he can get the slipstream.
We've actually got lap traffic already. Matt Strand's just exited. I think his car's exiting the pits. Matt Strand is one of them. We were looking forward to watching him come through the field, but it doesn't look like he's been so lucky. But we've actually got already Jonathan Patterson. That's a shame to see. He was, as I've mentioned a few times, came through Room 2 at Laguna Seca. It looks like his 11th place qualifying hasn't translated through to a decent race.
Oh, we've got a fight on here for second. Gomes is right up on the back of Sweeney. And he's making the move on the inside of 5, but Sweeney's going to outbrake him. He's not going to be able to make the move.
Right behind them is a satellite. Oh, there's a satellite car up the road. Can't quite pick out who that was.
The position lights indicated 30 seconds, so they were in the back part of the field.
Yeah, it was Jeffrey Smale. It wasn't a satellite car. It just looked like it from the camera angle I had. As you say, 30 seconds, so he's a lap down as well. I don't think he's getting out of the way because he was all the way in the grass.
You projected pre-race, Scott, that they would hit traffic around lap 5, and it turns out that that was a little too conservative.
It was, yes. Actually, TJ predicted that. I predicted it would be a bit longer because I figured anyone who was that far off the back would be in the pits by then, and I was right, but I didn't anticipate that they'd be also coming out of the pits by then. So that's what's ended up happening. So hopefully,
whoa! Everything's happened in the kink.
Is that Jeffrey? That's Jonathan Patterson has had an issue that I can see.
Alright, we'll go back to that soon. I think everyone who was affected escaped straight to pits.
We've got Jeffrey Smale, Max Calder holding up Alex Slupski, our pole sitter from race 2 at Laguna. He's got Ryan Thomas and Trevor Andruscu right behind him. Oh, and I heard a crunch from somewhere. Can't quite figure out where it is. But yeah, we've got a real mix of lapped cars and lead lap cars right here. It's basically Jeffrey Smale and Max Calder kind of need to get out the way of this 3-way battle for 6th before they cause a really big issue.
Right, it's Slupski, Thomas, and then, sorry, who is that behind? Ryan
That's
Thomas. Okay. So that's the fight for it. We've got a fight for 29th in front of a fight for 6th.
Yeah, I would hope that the guys battling for 29th realise that their battle is potentially should cede to the battle for 6th, but it doesn't look like that's happening as Trevor Andruscu has a really close run at Ryan Thomas. There we go, we've finally got Smale getting out of the way. Calder hasn't ceded. Meanwhile at the front of the field it's status quo really. Nick Froland stretching that gap, and it looks like his qualifying pace really is translating nicely into race pace. A car off there is, I thought for a second it might be it might be Roland, but it's actually Fernando Matos, who's in 26th, running through the grass. Yeah,
Alex Slupski taking a very defensive line into 6th. I think he senses the pressure from Ryan Thomas. And is this more lap traffic they've got in front of them? It looks like it is.
It is. It's Matos who just ran through the grass for about half a kilometre coming out of turn 6. So he's got himself back in good order for now, at least. So it's back to 3 cars ahead of this battle for 6th. There's Patterson, Matos, and Calder. Patterson had some pace in qualifying, so hopefully they won't catch him too quickly. The other two, not so much. Behind, Wes Dushak's managed to get himself, after that early off, he's managed to get the rhythm back, although he's just run into the back of Jeffrey Smale, who isn't up to pace. His car's probably damaged. It looks like it's got some damage, although the damage on the back, that might have been something that Dushak just gave him.
New fast lap for Nick Rolland, 2:04.9. Whoa, and Trevor Andrusco runs a little bit wide in 14, and the overcorrection is going to cost him.
That's a shame. He was having a great race there. Just needed to be patient and wait for the moment behind Ryan Thomas, but yeah, instead he's going to have to pit. Yeah, heavily grabbing car as he comes up into the pit lane.
Yeah, I understand the motivation because he, from Canada corner on, he had a lot of pace over Ryan Thomas. But exactly as you're saying, if he just capitalized on that, if he just waited for that to bear fruit, that whole thing wouldn't have happened. I think that's basically going to take him out of what would have actually been a really good starting position for for race 2.
Yeah, and also, I mean, he was possibly seeing a gap opening between Ryan Thomas and Alex Lipsky ahead of him, but he's just got to be more patient than that in these GT cars, especially on a track with essentially no runoff here. It's grass straight away on the edge of the track. So mistakes are punished really hard. It's worth driving within yourself, certainly at this point in what have we got, 20 minutes to go? Wow, that first 10 minutes were quick.
Yeah,
anyway.
It always does. It's always the first 10. You're like, what, who, how?
Yeah, but yeah, it's worth being a bit more patient than that. I don't think at that point of the race he had any hope of getting any higher than Alex Lipsky. So that's kind of, you've got to focus in and realise that all I've got to do is battle away for these 2 positions right in front of me, rather than, and you've got another 20 minutes to do it. So it's not worth pushing too hard and making mistakes like that at a track where such mistakes are punished so hard. So yeah, unfortunately, Trevor Andrescu, he will be able to get the fast repair in the pits, but it is going to drop him well out of contention. Certainly for
something has happened with James French, and there it is. Yeah, he's spun at the kink. I don't know if that was of his own doing.
I'm trying to find him.
Oh wow. Okay, so he's made a 3-point turn. Okay, we'll find the original accident at some point.
He didn't hit anything, so he should be okay to keep going.
And where has he landed? But 10th.
He spun on the inside curb, which is a little bit unusual. Usually it's people hit the grass on the exit, and yeah, unfortunately ended up broadside to the track facing the barrier, so had to make a 3-point turn. We've already talked through how difficult it is to flick spin. It wasn't a 3-point turn, actually, it was more like a 7-point turn.
Oh, look at the run he's got on Matt Hart. So he's going to make up 9th pretty quickly.
You'd think so. He just needs to, again, this is one of those moments where you can try to rush back and make up for the mistake he made, as he does make that move down the inside. Oh, and he knocks Matt Hart off the road. Unfortunately, the camera angle I was looking at that, I couldn't tell who. Matt Hart had a little bit of space towards the outside of the track, but James French was definitely coming over on him.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're looking at the same angle. I got the impression that French had pinched him a little bit under braking.
There was space to the outside, but you can't be moving around in the braking zone like that. There was space to the outside, but there was the whole time. It was not like Matt Hart came over at all. Yeah, that's really just James French coming over for no real reason there. I think Hart had given the position up. So hopefully that has dropped Matt Hart out of the top 10. So he's got some work to do to try and get back into that reverse grid position, which would set him up nicely for race 2.
Yeah, so as we've been watching this fight between Alex Lipsky and Ryan Thomas is morphed from a fight for, I think it was a fight for 8th at one point. Now it's a fight for 5th. Correct.
Yeah, and I think we've got just ahead of them, might as well mention it because we haven't so far, which is surprising. Andrea Zanini is all out on his own in a really strong 4th place right now.
Yeah, he might be pretty happy to not have any company around him.
Someone else we haven't mentioned so far, one of my favourites to call out, is Nikita Ponaris, who has come from a slightly better qualifying of 20th, as we have a spun. I think that's Jeffrey Smale has had another issue with the King. But Nikita Ponaris has come from a slightly better qualifying effort of 20th this week, and is now inside, I think, the top 10. Am I right? I think he just got into the top 10 as Matt Hart.
So he had just been moved out of the top 10 by I want to say Matt Hart. I'm not 100% on that, but I think he'd just been relegated from 10th to 11th. And then
Jason Drescher, though, has had an issue coming out of the last corner. I'm not sure how he's managed that. Oh, it's Max Calder, one of the lapped cars we were talking about. He was still holding Hugh North because he ran through the grass on the outside of the last corner and then managed to lose it while rejoining and took Jason Drescher with him. Actually didn't really lose it, just got back on the track in the middle of the circuit. Jason Drescher now is outside the top 10.
With that move from the 35 of Cole.
Right. Cole in again, holding strong with that BMW Z4, which is my favourite car in the class. So a BMW almost in the. Actually, he is in the top 10 now. Yeah, as you say, he's middle of 10th. It's a heavily damaged BMW.
It's a heavily damaged Jason Drescher too, but he's got enough slipstream that he might actually have a shot into 5, and he's going to try to take it.
And he's done it very well. Very good move. I think, yeah, this battle for the outside of the top 10, which is a point I was trying to make while we were talking about the Nikita Ponoris is that he's also heavily damaged, and he's lapping in the 2-minute 10s, which is 5 seconds off of the Nick Rowland pace. So I imagine that damage is not doing him any good. If we look at Nikita Ponoris's qualifying lap, it was a 2:08. So I'd imagine that damage is costing him a second to a second and a half. And he does look like he's struggling a little bit. So it's almost a slow race to 10th at the moment. Who can survive with their damaged cars? Because we've got Jeffrey Smiles a lap down. We've got Matt Hart, who is relatively undamaged, but he's run through the gravel recently.
Another fast lap from Nick Rowland at a 4.91 this time. So he hasn't let off at all.
Proving that the race conditions don't slow these cars down at all. So there's no excuse for not running a qualifying pace in the race. We've also got Kyle Lovero is a lap down, so we won't consider him in the battle in 10. But yeah, Nikita Ponoris, as we were saying, is currently holding on to that position, really struggling to get that turned in for the last corner there, with Jason Drescher in a more damaged looking car, but Drescher does seem to have a little bit more pace at the moment, closing in, I think, on Nikita Ponoris. We'll check the gap as they come across the line this time.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jason looks like he's at an unfair advantage actually, because he's clearly got a ton of front downforce.
This is Bachelor of Engineering in Aeronautics, Joseph Mudrak, giving his expert opinion on the iRacing aerodynamic model there.
Obviously, the most incredible aero model you could ever come across.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's empirical in this in iRacing, so we have to assume they're doing full CFD on every single car as they go around.
Every
live.
frame, it's incredible.
Yeah, CD Adapco need to give them a call. I don't understand why that hasn't happened so far. Anyway, getting back to the race. Again, we've kind of got this spread out situation at the front. I'm surprised to see, in fact, that Reed Sweeney has dropped Alex Gomes. Reed Sweeney's he was impressive at Laguna Seca, and this is perhaps even more impressive. Behind the ridiculous pace of Nick Rowland at the front, Reed Sweeney has become second best in the series at the moment. He's if you can drop someone at Road America, then you have a real pace advantage. So for him to drop Alex Gomes, who was our early benchmark at Okayama, we can see that some of these drivers are really starting to pick up through the year. They've obviously put in more and more preparation, getting more and more used to iRacing's physics. I will say Reed Sweeney is coming up onto the back of the searing battle for 20th between James Kelly and Perry Herndon. Perry Herndon, who we saw have a top 10 run earlier in the year. I think that was at Lime Rock, if I remember. Maybe that was that crazy race too. But he's got a clean-looking car, but that might just be because he's taken the fast with as Chance Kelly has. Reed Sweeney now right on the back of Chance Kelly in the Pride Audi R8.
And meanwhile, Matt Hart has just made a pretty clean move on the 35, and that'll bring him back up to 11th. And I think that puts him about 2.5 seconds behind the reverse grid pole and Jason Drescher. So we'll see. I would suspect he's got time to do it, but it'll be close.
In which case, we must have missed someone dropping out of the top 10, because last time I checked, it was Nikita Ponoris in 10th place. Or am I thinking it was Jason Drescher before that position switched?
I think that's right. Well, so Matt Hart was there for a bit before he was hip checked.
Yeah.
That may be the reshuffling that you're thinking about.
Yeah, I can't see anyone else who's ringing any bells as being in that position earlier, so we'll go with that. Nikita Ponoris then 9th, Jason Drescher 10th, he's now less than 2 seconds behind Ponoris, so that gap is closing down as well. And then Matt Hart is now 2.7 seconds behind Jason Drescher, so that gap is also closing down. So this is going to be a three-way fight for 9th, and only 2 of them can go through. Well, it's not exactly an advancement, it's not a heat race, but only 2 of them will get that front row position for race 2, whereas the other one will be starting at 11th. So that's an important position to keep our eyes on. Meanwhile, the battle for 5th between Alex Slipsky, Ryan Thomas, and Wes Dushak has stretched slightly. Oh no, I know who's missing. It's Hugh North, isn't it?
That's a great question. I didn't realize that he been back up there. Wasn't he involved in that big coming together in turn 5?
No, you are right. I must be thinking of Wes Duchak instead of it was a Mercedes. And I have Hugh North in my head in a Mercedes, Wes Duchak in a very, very similar Matt Minarelli Mercedes. That's why. Yeah, I knew it was a Matt Minarelli car, and then that said Hugh North to me. But no, you're right. Lap 1, Blake McCord and Hugh North came together. So, which I think there was a crash on lap 2 at Lime Rock, if I remember right, between those two. So maybe they've got a little bit of history.
Yeah, they're going to have to take the Friday night fun runs and kind of work the aggression out.
Yeah, I definitely recommend that. We do have actually Ryan Thomas closing in now on Alex Lipsky. He's under a second behind. I don't think Alex isn't being held up right now. Jonathan Patterson is a few seconds ahead, but he has been kind of the whole time since Jonathan Patterson took the reset on lap 1. So
we've got a lot of people. I don't know if this is an aberration of our timing screen or if it's truthful and accurate, but we've got a lot of people who on their last laps have set their best laps. That would include the two that we're looking at right now, Alex Lipsky and Ryan Thomas.
I see that on my timing screen as well, and in iRacing, yeah, that's qualifying. Yeah, in iRacing, I can back that up.
Okay, so what's the reason that's relevant is because Ryan Thomas's last lap and best lap then were about a third of a second better than Alex Lipsky. So he's got the pace if he, I think he's got time because there's only about 2/3 of a second between them. So it's all about catching up to them and making the move.
Yeah, essentially the two cars are. He needs a couple more tenths and he'll be in the slipstream range. So he's essentially right on him. Once you're in the slipstream range, you're there really. So yeah, I imagine it shouldn't. At this rate, it won't take any more than a lap, and he'll be right on him and ready to attack. As long as Jeffrey Patterson doesn't. Is it Jeffrey? Yeah, as long as Jonathan Patterson doesn't offer a slipstream up to Alex Lipsky, that could change things as well.
Yeah, there's obviously nobody close to them in terms of position rather than track position because there's some 50, a lot of seconds. So maybe 14, 15 seconds up to Andre Azzolini in 4th.
Yes, but only 2.5 back to Wes Duchak and another 2.5 to James French, who is obviously, well, I say obviously, as you would expect from qualifying, James French is coming up on the back of these guys at a rate of knots. He's over a second quicker than the two drivers in front, and then a 1.5 seconds quicker than Alex Lipsky, while being only 5 seconds behind that battle. So with about 4 laps to go, so it's going to be really tight if these guys don't get into a fight as we come past my favourite paint scheme in the field, Cole Mathewson. I know Joseph doesn't share the opinion, but
no, it's terrible, and I think you're colorblind.
If I was colorblind, then that would look like a pretty plain car to me, I think. But, got Ryan, who's kind of slinkying in and out of slipstream range.
Yeah, I thought that was well. I don't know if you noticed. I thought it was curious from the run from 3 down to 5. It looked like Ryan Thomas was almost actively avoiding being in the slipstream. I don't know if he's trying to plan it so that he has a last lap kind of lunge, but I thought that was kind of curious.
That would definitely be in the category of overthinking if that is where his head is at the moment.
Let's go back to, as soon as I can find it, let's go back to this fight for 9th.
It's just changed hands, Joseph. I was quite happy to let the two of you carry on there. You've done a fantastic job, but Jason just passed Nikita Poneris to take P9 and demoted Nikita Poneris to the race 2 pole.
But also demoted Nikita Poneris to the clutches of Matt Hart, who is closing in from behind.
The recovering Matt Hart, isn't it?
Yes, he was bumped off the road by James French earlier on. So, but the car is relatively undamaged. There's a little bit of what I would call bonnet, I think you would call hood damage to the front of that Mercedes, but that shouldn't be holding him up at all. Hence his pace is pretty strong, whereas Nikita Poneris does look like he's struggling with a little bit more, a few more witness marks certainly on the front of that Audi R8.
Yeah, you can see from that It's very much a kind of if only I could get there, if only I could get there situation, because he's seeing them nose to tail, and he must be thinking, okay, if I could just get closer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's always the case with this track. If you haven't quite got the pace to catch someone, you know that if you were just within that 1 second slipstream range, that you'd be sitting behind them, making yourself a cup of tea at the same time. It makes it so much easier around here. I was just going to make the point that David Cole has unfortunately not been able to drag up to the back of them on the back of Matt Hart. So it really is this three-way fight, but only 2 of them go to the front row for race 2. You got something, Joseph?
Yes, I do. Have you noticed that we have a new second place?
I hadn't. I have now.
Reed Sweeney has dropped back to 3rd, and he's not just shortly behind Alex Gomes. He's dropped a long way back. 3.5 seconds behind Alex Gomes, number 64 Mercedes.
Let me see if I can identify what's happened for you guys.
It was a spin in Canada corner. He dropped his left rear tyre into the grass and turn in, and that spun him broadside to the road. He managed to recover as quickly as you can in that situation. Because that momentum, you also lose 5 seconds. He's just going to be 3rd at this point in the race. Not the chance for that, but nothing really lost other than that one position. Andre Hazelin wasn't close enough to capitalise as well, and also has to be lapped out in between. But yeah, simple little spin, unfortunately, for Reed Sweeney.
To go back to a point we made at the top of the show, Scott, or you made at the top of the show, these are the kind of results that Alex Gomes needs moving forward in the championship. Let's put Nick Rowland aside. He is well and truly checked out from the field, and there's no way he's going to run him down. And honestly, even into race 2, it would be a challenge to stay with him lap after lap, knowing Rowland's pace. But for Gomes to maximize the points is now kind of the name of the game through the rest of the season. He's been consistent. Now he needs, like you said, I think your phrase was the big scores. And a second to Nick Rowland around here is probably as well as you're going to be able to do.
Yeah, it's those 90 and 100 point scores that are going to be important for Gomes. Rowland, I mean, the wins are great, but really surviving race 2s, I think, is going to be critical to his championship. If he can afford 1 more issue, but if he has 2 more issues, and that has kind of been the problem this year, I think, is coming through the pack from reverse grid position.
Well, look at the inside into turn 5 by Ryan Thomas and Alex Slupski. Slupski is wide in the number 29 Mercedes, and through goes Ryan Thomas into P5. Through on the braking zone there.
And then he goes wide a little bit himself.
Yep, just enough to give Alex a thought about a look up the inside as I got on the throttle exiting turn 6. But for the moment, I think he's just able to hold Alex at bay. Alex is super aggressive on the brakes down the hill into turn 8. Thomas a little wide again as they come back on the throttle. And he's got to have to find a rhythm here now that he's got clear track in front of him. I think we mentioned a couple weeks ago, it's very easy when you're behind somebody to fall into their rhythm and setting your driving style off of their marks. And then as soon as you get past them, once you've been clear or stuck behind them for a couple of laps, as you're clear, you need to find your marks again and find your rhythm. And it's allowing Alex to just hang with him for the moment and a whole host of cars behind them. I think Alex is in the draft here into Canada corner. Is he going to try something on the brakes? No, he just dabs the brakes a little bit early there. He gets a little better to the apex than Ryan is able to. And there's still nose to tail as they head up into the left-hander at turn 13.
You mentioned the gaggle of cars behind. 2 of them are Wes Duchak and James French. James French has now got onto the back of Duchak.
Oh, Thomas is wide, and here goes Alex Slupski up the inside at turn 14. Sorry to interrupt, Scott, but that was exactly the opportunity Slupski needed. He wasn't desperate to get past, considering the pass had just been made on him, but he's been able to repay the favor, and Ryan Thomas will not come through across the line inside the top 5 as yet. Alex Slupski is able to hold the position, moves back across in the braking zone, and just forces Ryan Thomas to lift as they get on the binders into turn 1, and we're going to do this again on the run into turn 5.
Yeah, Slupski realized that Thomas had a run on him, took a defensive posture coming into turn 1 down the front straightaway, and then once he realized he was still clear, pulled back over to the driver's left and gave himself the optimal driver's line.
Make sure you keep your eye on the battle 7's just behind them, and in fact I think it's changing positions now. It looks like Duchak may have pulled over and backed off to let James French go through. French was putting extreme pressure on Duchak for the entirety of the last lap, and yeah, now slips through into turn 5. So French I think we've got 2 laps to go at this point for these drives. Well, just under 2 laps.
I think that's right. We'll be approaching the white flag soon.
Should be.
Rowland is coming around Canada corner right now, to clarify.
So James French, unfortunately, has just been balked by Jonathan Patterson, the laps car. does have a lot of pace on these two in front. So there's a bit more than a second, 1.7 seconds, 1.4 seconds up to Ryan Thomas. James French has been as much as a second and a half quicker than them, but I think that's going to be a tall order. Possibly Canada corner on the last lap if these two don't have a perfect lap, or I should say if Ryan Thomas doesn't have a perfect lap.
Just to pivot back to our race 2 grid, we know it's an invert of the top 10 from race 1, and at the moment 10th is Nikita Ponaris, and he's just holding on to that 10th spot ahead of Matt Hart. We had touched on this battle just a couple minutes ago. Ponaris, for the most part, has been able to hang in the draft of Jason Drescher, which has kept him up far enough ahead of Matt Hart to keep him out of striking range. But I think Nikita is maybe just working his tires a little bit too hard, or in any case has fallen now out of that draft range from Jason Drescher, and as they come around to receive the white flag behind, and this is going to be Matt Hart's ready to crack that top 10, and for him it's worth 10 spots and potentially more than that when we get to the end of race 2. But for now, it's about a lap and 20 seconds or so that they're going to have to fight this out for the bottom end of the top 10.
And we've got a little bit of connection issues as well on Matt Hart. And that's one more thing that Nikita Ponaris is going to have to be thinking about, and that is going to distract him as he's trying to maintain this. Ponaris comes into
he's got a pit. I wonder if the Audi, his Audi in particular, is a little short on fuel.
I don't know if you can adjust fuel with a fixed setup. That shouldn't have been the case.
You can't. We've
Side
done
by
this.
side for 5th place, Alex Slupski and Ryan Thomas coming down to turn 5.
Slupski is deep, and through goes Ryan Thomas at turn 5 again. He just did this 2 laps ago.
And here's James French. James French is coming in too.
It's now a 3-way battle for 5th. It's French in 7th, Slupski 6th, Ryan Thomas in 5th, and Slupski has now got to regain his composure really, really quickly because, as you point out, Joseph, it's James French's opportunity to jump up into 6th and maybe even take a stab at Ryan Thomas with just a few corners to go.
Wide, and he spun in front of James French. Bit of contact there. That's going to hold up James French and stop any chance of him getting through, unfortunately.
Meanwhile, across the line, Nick Rowland takes race 1.
French is now spun. He lost the position to Wes Dushak and has spun on the inside of the carousel straight afterwards. He's able to rejoin the track without losing any further positions, but that's a shame for that battle to end like that. We were hoping for one final lap of really good stuff there, but it's going to leave Ryan Thomas clear to get 6th place, Alex Slupski clear to get 5th. Alex Lipsky obviously had the spin, so he is now behind Ryan Thomas and down to 8th. He actually ended up behind James French, who recovered before Slipsky came through. So yeah, it's going to be Dushak 6th, French 7th, and Slupski 8th.
Yeah, Dushak is the one we kind of lost sight of there. You're absolutely right. Ryan Thomas is going to come through in 5th as we saw the move down at turn 5. Dushak is going to come through behind Thomas for P6. Slipski in 7th, and then James French, who had spun just after Slipski's spin.
Slipski's maybe run it dry?
He's struggling to get the line. He's not going to make it, in fact. My camera's not helping me. No, that is definitely before the finish line. So
yeah, he's not going to make it. You're absolutely right.
This is going to it's not going to be Ponaris. It's going to be Trevor Andruscu who's going to come around for 10th. And so, yeah, Slipski's not going to make it. So we've had another Okayama-style fuel drop.
And he's going to make the pass right now.
Yep. He just missed out. Alex Slipski. He missed out on 8th, but then also, dropping through the top 10. The car's dead stick on the front straightaway. He's going to drop all the way to the end of the lead lap.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not just that he's missed out on the good starting position from back in the top 10, he's also going to fall all the way back to, I think it's going to be 17th.
I think you're right, Joseph. Hugh North, he'll come through just ahead of Hugh North, or wind up just ahead of Hugh North, the first car lap down, not being able to complete that final lap after 30 minutes of racing.
Hugh North actually had a crash on this lap, the King, which is why he hasn't finished. What the point I was going to make about Alex Lipsky is, I wonder if he'd have made it across the line if he hadn't spun this lap. Because
that's an interesting thought, actually. That might have been just the difference maker.
Exactly. He probably wasted a couple of 100 mil of fuel recovering the car in the grass, and that would have been enough to at least get him across the line, possibly even in the top 10. So that's it's a massive and that all stemmed from him overshooting turn 5 under pressure from Ryan Thomas. So, yeah, not that of course we should be excusing these cars running out of fuel with a fixed setup. At the same time, I suppose you could question whether the drivers should be keeping an eye on that at least, and if they have to go into fuel save, they have to go into fuel save. But yeah, that's one small issue just snowballs itself into Alex Slupski now having to start 16th for race 2. Again, that's not actually that terrible in a 36 car field, but yeah, it's definitely not the 5th place he was hoping for at the start of the last lap.
It's not terrible, Scott, if the start is clean. But if it's not clean, that's exactly the part of the field where you're going to find yourself surrounded by carnage. And you had mentioned coming up to the green flag while I was sort of working through some internet issues. It's very narrow.
Yeah, I just want to make the point really quickly that this isn't a situation like we had at Okayama where it's one make in particular, right? Because there are several Mercedes. Alex is also in a Mercedes here. There are several Mercedes that did cross the line.
Oh, all of them, except for him. I think the only other car to run out of fuel was Nikita Pronoris, and he's in an Audi.
Right.
And, of course, Nick Rowland was out there running the fastest lap of the race, lap after lap after lap, and still made it home without running out of fuel.
Absolutely. We can only really find out from the drivers what was really going on there.
In watching the Discord here, Scott, it seems like, in addition to Alex running out of fuel, and we saw Nikita being really, really close, Trevor Andrisco in the Mercedes was also very close. Somebody looking for an extra gallon into the Ferrari. And he said he was conserving the last 2 laps and still only just coasted across the line.
Now it'll be time as we wait for the reset. We'll go into some of the replays. If you guys are curious about any incidents in particular, I think that's just.
I'm actually looking for the reason why Matt Strand didn't make it through lap 1. I found Perry Herndon having an enormous accident out of the kink on that one, but Matt somehow squeezed through that. Oh no, he didn't. Sorry, his car blinked out for me because I wasn't looking at that part. Just one of the vagaries of how iRacing works. And as he reappeared, he was flipping through the air. So obviously didn't quite make it. A couple more cars I can see didn't make it through the same crash. And this is all down to Chance Kelly, I'm afraid, just not holding the brakes after he flew through the air, having smashed into Perry Herndon. He then didn't hold the brakes, came across the track, and got impaled by Austin Olds. So yeah, there was a big mess towards the back of the field, just out of the kink at the end of lap 1.
Yeah, I think we'll be watching here a replay of the incident between Blake McCourt and Hugh North. Oh yeah, it looked like Hugh just totally missed his braking point. It wasn't necessarily Blake. Well, it's tough to tell because Hugh may have gone to driver's left in initial avoidance of Blake McCourt, and then that's.
Another good one to look at is Tyler Hoffman in this same crash on that one out of the kink. If anyone knows what Arca brakes are, this was a prime example of Tyler Hoffman having them installed. Just decided to drive flat out through a yellow flag zone and straight into the back of a car that had been going slow for a few seconds because it had been involved in the crash. Didn't change line. He just ran into the back of it.
We're watching the Max Calder accident now. Okay, so he was actually turned coming into the corner, and then somebody kind of ran into him. I don't necessarily put that on Max, although you know, that in my mind is kind of in the fog of war kind of thing. And then he was clipped at coming through the carousel, and then what happened?
Yeah, that was Blake McCord losing it for a second time in 3 corners, I think. Although that one was all on its own.
At that point, that accident looks like that really damaged Max's suspension.
Yeah, that car's undrivable at that point.
And then you've got traffic coming through the kink, who does see it and is able to avoid him, so that could have gone worse.
I could tell from the inflection in your voice there that was unexpected.
Yeah, it was a little bit.
You made a sensible decision and not just trying to go for the gap that exists at the time. It definitely won't exist in 2 seconds.
And this was the incident at the kink that we caught the tail end of.
What lap are we on here?
But this is still the first lap. It was a very...
Right.
Oh, wow. Okay.
several
I see the
accidents.
accident in the kink that you're talking about, Scott.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
There's about 4 accidents between the kink and the entrance to Canada Corner there that all sort of combine into one giant nor'easter, if you will.
Do you have Tyler Hoffman's view of this?
Oh, wow.
Quite
My
entertaining.
goodness. Yeah, that's...
So this is why we only had 15 cars finish on the lead lap.
Oh my word!
That was...
Is this
a
what
lot.
we're looking at here in the 13?
Sorry, I missed that, Brendan.
No, it's Austin Olds. We were following a TV camera, a trackside camera, I think, for Austin Olds. If we could get a look at that from Austin's onboard.
Oh, sure.
phenomenal.
Okay.
Yeah, he really picked his way through that, and then just about threw the car off on the run down to Canada Corner.
Oh, excuse me. That's
Really
this
nice
is
look
this is
by
the
Austin.
wrong incident. Austin was involved in... Austin had a very exciting first lap.
Yeah, I'll say.
So this is
An
the roll
onboard
bar from
here is
Austin.
fantastic. So it's all sort of happened already. There goes the number 7 off to the driver's right. He slides through 1 accident, 2 accidents, 3 accidents, and then sort of 4.5 here at the end, and
my
just
God.
gets away with it.
That was Chance Kelly not holding the brakes.
Wow.
So, if you're able to go
And then he
back
puts
and
in the gravel at the exit of Canada Corner.
he's just so
There goes my hero.
amazed that he managed to survive all of that. Can we see where Austin Olds ended up in the race? Did it do him any good?
No, not really. He ended up 25th.
Yeah, so obviously more going, unfortunately, later in the race for Austin Olds. Although he did start, did I have just 39th? Yeah, he started 39th, so there aren't even 39 cars in the race, so he was obviously starting 6 places behind the last car in front of him.
Just for what it's worth, so the point was raised in the league Discord here that Nick Rowland crossed the line with about 5 seconds left. So I suspect what happened is that they were counting on a race pace that wasn't sub 2:05 from your overall
Nick
leader.
Rowland's pace was so fast that he's broken the entire lead.
Which makes sense.
Correct.
That would explain why Poneris had to come in on the last lap. Because I thought potentially he had just kind of messed up. I thought Nikita Poneris had made a mistake in coming in the last lap, not realizing that it was going to be the last lap. But that doesn't seem like that would be the case.
No, it was. I think Rowland pushed things a lap far, and even Rowland himself had to fuel save for a lap, and then made it with about 2 liters in the car at the end of the race. Now, naturally, if you have a more fuel thirsty driving style, an extra lap could very easily catch you off guard. That is 4 miles, mind you. So the end result, or the net result of all that, is that race 2 is going to be 27 minutes, not 30. And that should keep all cars well within fuel range.
Okay, all right.
I have to question why these fixed setups don't just have a full fuel tank, if I'm honest, because then we would definitely be safe, no matter what pace any of the drivers ran. But they do seem to like pushing the limit with having as little fuel in the cars as possible, so possibly something to think about for the future.
Oh, this is peculiar. So Tyler Hoffman must have pitted and basically only done required damage. And that required damage must not have been very
Which
much.
is odd, considering that there is a fast repair available to... I think it's 1 fast repair, but
It is,
unless,
but it's
this
one
is
per phase.
unless this is after lap 1 and this is a secondary crash, then he would have had that available to him.
No, that was that was the result of him coming out of the pit. So it
Yeah, so he must have accidentally unchecked it or something.
Right.
I've had experience with this recently where if you haven't checked it before you start service, you don't get the fast repair. Most of the time it's checked by default in iRacing, but you can disable that, so maybe that's something he's done. I think Brendan, you also have witnessed some issues with
An
that.
identical situation, Scott, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's worth knowing for anyone who wasn't aware of that little bit of information. Make sure you've got your fast repair checks before you enter your pit stall if you want to take it.
yeah, I think the default is to set it on, but I actually
Yeah, for a lot of endurance races where you're given 1 fast repair, the drivers will change that in their app ini file to default it off, because you don't want to use it for like 1 second damage. You'd rather save it for later on in the race if you need it. And that's certainly what we were doing at Vulcan Horse Motorsport, and it cost both of our cars. It cost one of them a finish, and one of them 20 minutes sat in the pits at the last race. But obviously, if you're in that situation,
here's the incident that dropped Ponderous down the order. Just got loose coming through the kink. Over-rotated.
He's lucky he's in a rear engine or a mid-rear engine car there, otherwise that car would have been absolutely dead.
Right.
Apparently these GT3 cars are absolute tanks, because that was, even in a mid-engine car, that probably should have been race-ending, but instead he was only a second a lap after that.
Who needs a radiator?
Whenever I crash a GT3 car, it doesn't seem to survive quite that well, but maybe that's just my luck.
Yeah.
Ponderous, yeah.
I didn't know you crashed GT3 cars, Scott.
Occasionally. Just after the team. Joseph, do you know what lap that incident for Ponderous was on?
That was early. That was on his third.
So that could be a contributing factor to his fuel mileage?
It absolutely could have been. He probably would have been on the throttle for a little bit longer if he'd had damage.
Yeah, I think the iRacing damage model does... Oh, and there's Austin Olds having another issue.
Yeah, that was Adam Maxwell, I think, had picked up damage from another incident and managed to collect Austin.
Don't reverse across the track, Austin. Running through a J10 and car with ABS is not a sensible idea. Yeah, the iRacing damage model definitely does increase drag if you have aero damage. Josh Olson there having it.
Whoa, that was enormous.
Line.
There's Andrew Malthez, I think. Yeah, we'll watch it from his onboard.
But yeah, so the iRacing damage model does increase drag if you have aero damage, so that would hurt fuel mileage. It also does... anyone who watched the Virgin Australia Supercars eSeries race this morning may have noticed that Scott McLaughlin suffered a fuel leak after he had a crash early in race 2, I think.
Like an actual fuel leak?
Yeah, as in iRacing conveniently doesn't warn you, but it just drops your fuel through the floor.
That's very Grand Prix Legends, where you're just like, what happened to my fuel pressure? Oh, it's 0. That's not what you want.
Yeah, he exited the pits after taking repairs, and his crew chief had turned off fuel because it wasn't necessary, because they have setups that can definitely last a full race. But he left the pits and immediately got the low fuel warning, so it turns out that he'd lost about 60 litres worth of fuel in a leak. I think that's quite new to iRacing.
Sneaky
damage.
Dave Kemmer.
Yeah, you would think you would maybe tell people.
Yeah. I suppose in real life you have to work it out for yourself. But yeah, I suppose that's one thing that you didn't think was even possible in this physical realm. You might be forgiven for not.
Yeah, I'd be a little surprised if I was driving a car and they were like, "Oh, by the way, it has a fuel line."
In a sim, yeah. Yeah,
just like in the world, you're just like, okay. Like, or alternatively, you know, instead of driving my Focus every day, I step into it and all of a sudden, oh, this is weird. It's a Prius.
I think this is sort of the sim racing equivalent of getting into your Focus to drive to work in the morning and finding out that your 3/4 of a tank from the night before is suddenly about an 1/8.
Yeah, something like that.
With no warning.
That's a big crash for Fernando there.
Yeah.
My theory falls apart slightly if you then look at the Alex Slupski case, where I'm pretty sure was undamaged. He had a very clean race. So I mean that says to me that this is James French doing his 7-point turn, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll watch.
The setups are clearly quite tight on fuel, but should be safe. But it seems like certain driving styles and spins on the last lap can bring you up 100 meters or so short, and also some damage that gives you extra drag can also bring you up short on fuel. Which, I would have thought they would leave more margin in the fixed setup, but that's the situation we're in, and therefore race 2 is going to be 3 minutes shorter.
Poor Max chased that for so long, only to get clipped and.
Yeah, and then unsafely rejoin in front of Jason Drescher, who he actually managed to get his top 10 position back, right? Yeah, Jason Drescher ended up 8th, so I think he was running 8th before that crash, so it didn't end up losing a huge amount, but it's still a obviously he would have been pretty disappointed at the time with that rejoin from Max.
I'm a little surprised at how this must be. I haven't tried these setups out, but it must be an awfully loose setup through the kink. The number of people that we've seen oversteer off.
Lap 1 is going to be the cold tires,
Okay.
and these guys really should know about that. So that's something.
Well,
we
this
should,
is at this point. This is for David here. This is on lap 6, so it had been a while.
Yeah, we definitely saw a couple more. I mean, we saw James French quite late on in the race have the same problem. GT3 cars are difficult through that corner, especially, and it's also really difficult to save them with traction control and ABS the way they are on the cars.
Yeah, you can't use weight transfer to really help you out.
Yeah, and once
you
things
can't
start
lock
going
up the brakes, so just make it skid through the turn.
Exactly. Once things start going wrong, there's much less. You have far fewer options for saving a car that's already on its way to having a crash. It's kind of just going to do it if you have to fight through TC and ABS at the same time.
I think we found what dropped Austin back to 25th.
One of them. Oh, that was a big one.
Yeah, that's busted the engine. So if he didn't have he must have used his fast repair to get out of that.
Yeah, he was lucky to get through that first lap carnage without using it, and still had. Although actually, I don't know if these guys only have one or do they have unlimited fast repairs. We should probably try and get that.
We should probably find out that very basic information.
I believe it's just a single fast repair. Yeah, it is one. It is one fast repair limit.
Okay.
Good.
That's maybe the widest radius I've ever seen through turn 14. So I think that's a very inventive alignment. I'm anxious to see if anybody will try it in race 2.
Incidentally, to race 2, we're 13 minutes to the end of the warm-up session. That'll take us to the second green flag of the night.
That's a very subtle way to tell me that I can join the new session, Brendan. Thank you.
I'm just passing information along.
Anyway. Okay, so we'll I'll leave it up to you guys. Breaking the piercing the veil, I guess. Breaking the fourth wall and piercing the veil. I don't know which one it is, but I'm doing both of them.
Piercing the fourth veil.
I'm Larry King.
What a terrible idea for a show. This is Larry King talking to his producers.
Anyway, so I'll leave it to you guys. Do you want to keep talking while we make this change over to the second room, or would you like to take say a 5-minute break?
I am going to step away briefly.
Okay.
And then return. You're welcome to continue talking about whatever you like. Otherwise, I'll just move us on, and we'll be ready to go for race 2 in a few minutes.
Okay, great. We will see you guys in 5.
Sounds very good. Yep, 11 minutes, just under 12 minutes actually, to go to the green flag for race 2. DriversEye Live, Brendan Kasmarek, Joseph Mudrock, and Scott Michaels with you for another 45 minutes or so this evening. Happy to have your company, and we'll be back with race 2 in just a few short minutes. Everybody, 8:38 p.m. Eastern on your Wednesday night. Happy to have your company on DriversEye Live. I'm Brendan Casimir. Eric Jones, who you'll hear from in just a few moments here. America for the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. We've had one 30-minute sprint already, won by Nick Rowland. A second win on the season, at least as far as our scored events go. And another $100 towards the entry in next year's SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando. Race 2 tonight. It's been cut short just a little bit. 27 minutes will be the race distance. Just to, I think we saw a little bit faster pace than we were, and pushed the race an extra lap, and unfortunately caused a few fuel issues just towards the end of the race there for some of the less
fortunate
drivers, let's say. Yeah, that's probably the right word. But anyway, Scott, I'll throw it to you. A pretty awesome race. Maybe not for the lead, but we saw some battles between Gomes and Sweeney, some battles for fifth, and then sort of the back end of the top 10 there. It really kind of kept our interest through the last 10 or 12 minutes especially.
Yeah, it depends what your definition of awesome is, because Nick Rowland's pace was something else, that's for sure. Just complete class of his own for the whole event. Yeah, not a lot of position changing, but that's fine. That's racing. We have good and bad races. Not everything has to be an absolute barnstormer, otherwise you wouldn't appreciate them. So, but we did have that incident for Reed Sweeney, which could prove really important in the championship, because while he and Alex Gomes are both looking for strong results, for Reed Sweeney to trade second place with Alex Gomes, that could end up being really important. Unless, of course, Nick Rowland carries this current form through the remainder of the season and manages to stay clean, because then he's going to walk away with it. So we'll see how that goes. But it's interesting now that, especially with Brendan Baker, unfortunately, not being here tonight, that looks like our championship kind of boils down to those three, and they finished clear of the field in race 1 there. So it's going to be great watching these guys come through from the back end of the top 10 to see if they can again set themselves apart as the real class of the field in this championship.
Nick Rowland, who is he won the first race at Lime Rock, struggled a little bit last week at Laguna Seca, but obviously won our first race here tonight. His kryptonite through the course of the season has been these race 2s. He inevitably gets kicked to the back of the top 10 because of the top 10 invert for the grid for race 2, and inevitably just sort of finds trouble along the way, not necessarily his own doing, but it's meant that he's posted a couple of poor results in race 2, including a DNF last week at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca, and it'll very much his interest moving towards the championship. Start results in race 2. He's certainly got the pace to post another win and pick up another 100 points if he's patient and clean through the first couple of laps, but so much of this is going to depend on having any amount of luck at all to get through the first couple of laps and into some clean air where he can start picking guys off one by one.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. The fact that unlike Laguna Seca, I think he has so much pace over the field here that he can really afford to be patient, and all he needs is a little bit of luck, not getting completely wiped out, and he'll easily be able to pick his way through the field, even if he just hangs around in 10th for the first 5 or 10 minutes. So yeah, that's going to be something to really keep our eyes on. Meanwhile, it's down to Alex Gomes and the other guys at the front of the championship to try and put pressure on him by getting through this field as quickly as possible. But at the same time, yeah, we've seen that not work in weeks past. So yeah, let's keep our eyes on the 8th, 9th, 10th starters for this race.
Joseph, if you're in, let's say, Alex Gomes' position, who has posted a bunch of really consistent results, and you're starting right alongside Nick Rowland, you're on the inside line, but for all intents and purposes, you're going to come across the line together for race 1. What's your approach? Do you let Nick and then just pick your way through the field behind him, or do you think there's value in trying to hold him off for as long as you can?
I think your best bet. Remember here that Nick Rowland had, by the end of the race, I think something like maybe 17-second gap on Alex Gomes. You were basically, I think, you're making one of two bets, right? You either think that you can pick through traffic fast enough that you might A, be able to pick up a gap, and B, luck into Nick Rowland running into trouble, maybe, you know, tripping over somebody, having a spin, which that's a totally valid strategy. Or you can say, okay, I'm just going to settle for second or third here, depending on where I and Sweeney play out, and you're just going to, as you say, kind of let him pick his way through first through eighth, basically, and try to follow along with him. I think either are kind of valid, but if he waits, if he sticks behind on lap one on that first corner, he's basically betting against himself. So I don't think that's what he'll end up doing.
Yeah, for my money, if I'm Alex, I think I concede the position if it's at all the contest through the first couple of corners, and then count on Nick having a sort of prototypical race too for him, and maybe catching some bad luck. Not that you want that on your competitors, but when it comes to fighting for a championship, obviously you'll take what you can get, and then, you know, do what you have to do to keep your nose clean as you pick your way through the remainder of the top 10, and see, you know, with any luck, you're either going to end up P2 or P1.
The question, I think, comes down to, do you think there's more danger behind you or in front of you? And I think there's probably more danger. It's tough to say. But basically, with the run into turn 5, do you think that there's a risk of somebody, you know, maybe getting hit from behind and ending up on the grass? You know, there's freak things that can just happen when you have these kind of mixed up grids like this.
Sure, and we're about to find out what those might be. Trevor Andrisco and Matt Hart on the front row, Jason Drescher and James French row 2, Wes Duchek and Ryan Thomas 5th and 6th, Azzolini and Reed Sweeney are P7 and 8, and then Alex Gomes and Nick Rowland, of whom we just spoke, round out your top 10. David Cole and Blake McCord 11th and 12th. We'll leave the grid there as we swing on to the front straightaway. It's Trevor Andrisco in the black Mercedes to driver's right, Matt Hart in the number 4 NVIDIA Mercedes to driver's left. They head up the hill, and Matt Hart has gone, Andrisco has not. Now Hart lays off, and Andrisco comes back on the throttle. He's getting across the line in P1, but that was really, really ugly, and it has absolutely destroyed any hope the left lane had of a decent run to turn 1. It's the odd number of positions on the front who are going to win out big here, and Andrisco leads from Jason Drescher. Matt Hart slips back to 3rd. I think it's James French in the Audi on the inside of Hart now into the braking zone for turn 3. The Ben & Jerry's Mercedes hits the back of Matt Hart and spins him right in front of Nick Rowland, who is himself spinning off to driver's left at the exit of turn 3. Lap 1, race 2, and Nick Rowland is P20.
What were we saying about all he had to do was get...
Oh, and there's a big accident on the Azzolini, and it's Nick Rowland. No, I'm sorry, that's Azzolini, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Number 13.
Oh, it's not Andre Azzolini, it's Vincent Clement.
But
Reed Sweeney is part of that?
Yep, so Reed Sweeney, our other championship protagonist, is in even worse position than Nick Rowland. So.
Well, we were just talking about where the trouble was going to come from, whether it was in front or behind of somewhere like Alex Gomes' starting position. It's been all around him.
Nick Rowland's been spun out again. This time it's ridiculous driving, frankly, from the police car. I'm trying to work out who that was. Timothy Swiggett. Rowland was just making a clean move down the inside, and Swiggett...
smoking in front.
He clipped the grass on the right and just went straight left into Rowland and took him out.
I'm going to keep on... I'm going to watch Nick Rowland for a while, because I think this is going to be a really interesting run through the kink here.
Yeah, this is lap 1 on the kink. We saw some chaos in race 1, and it's exactly what we see. He comes off the corner to a wall of black and white smoke. He picks his way through most of it after a brush to the a brush against the wall on driver's right, but he's already got a ton of damage from the chaos of lap 1 prior to this.
He's just been hit again.
He was, and that was... I'm not sure who that was, but it was ugly.
That was
Maxwell.
That was Nick Rowland, unfortunately, running wide and then basically having to stop on the exit of the corner. And Maxwell had... And again, this is a problem with these cars having ABS. So it gives you really no option in that kind of situation. So Maxwell ended up running straight into it.
These are all people here who were involved in that run. These several accidents from the run from 3 into 5. So Nick now is going to take that fast repair, you would assume.
amazingly, around the last corner, he had Reed Sweeney right in front of him. So those two who started right together on the grid ended the lap right together, but it was a bit of an adventure in between.
Yeah, I think what Nick Rowland can't afford here is a DNF. He already had one at Laguna Seca, and that's sort of his mulligan for the season in terms of race drop. In this case, he needs to take the faster car and carry on through the remaining 24 minutes or so through to the end of the race.
Oh!
As many points as he can.
Matt Strand is stranded. I think that's out of turn 3, and almost took Reed Sweeney with him as he was just wandering across the track at no speed at all. Another spin there, that's Austin Olds. I've seen that car spinning a few times today.
Adam Maxwell was a part of that accident with Matt Strand. Strand just sort of lost it coming off of turn 1, and Maxwell, well, it was more Maxwell losing it, and then right into the side of Strand, and the two of them went spinning after contact, sort of pinballing down the straightaway into the braking zone for turn 3. Let's reset the front of the field now. It's Trevor Andrisco who's come out through the chaos in P1. He started P1, so he's relatively safe there at the front of the field. Jason Drescher he sat in second, but he's been passed now by James French, the number 31 Audi. So it's Andrisco, French, Drescher, and then Wes Duchak in 4th. Alex Gomes has got by Andre Azzolini for 5th. And then Andre Azzolini back there in 6th. Blake McCord is P7. Alex Slipsky is still, he's starting race 2 more or less where he began the last lap of race 1, right at the back of the top 10. And then Jonathan Patterson in the 63 Mercedes sits right there in 10th, just off the back of Alex Slipsky.
Trevor Andrisco, our leader, sets a fast lap right before Alex Gomes does. So Alex Gomes, who is up to 5th now. He was 8th as recently as halfway through that last lap, but he's obviously making some progress here. It'll be really interesting to see how long it takes Alex to pull up to Trevor. I'm going to go back through some replays here and see if we can figure out what exactly happened, because I think it was a lot.
I think it's really started with the really strange start.
Ponerous made an error into... Wow! Okay, well, you shouldn't reverse.
The grass on the brakes into turn 1, but that reversing onto the track was wildly unnecessary.
Yeah, that was...
It just wasn't the way to recover the car, even if there weren't any other cars around, let alone if you've got another 10 cars barreling through.
You know what I wonder? I wonder if maybe he downshifted into reverse basically by accident, thinking that he was still in 3rd or whatever and trying to get into 1st.
Yeah, possible. I hope so, because otherwise that's one of the worst rejoins. I mean, you see a lot of bad rejoins in iRacing, but that's in the top category of bad rejoins. But yeah, I mean, all the chaos started with Matt Hart, I think, was starting the outside of the front row, and I was watching the Nick Rowland, Reed Sweeney group at the time, and that completely shuffled those guys, and I'm amazed they all managed.
David Cole, excuse me, so David Cole ran wide. Let me try to... Wow. So there was the big bunch up between Reed Sweeney and Nick Rowland. Then David Cole here runs it a little wide, and that kicks everything off.
Yeah, that's David Cole just having not a lot of awareness of where his car is on the straight, and he clipped the grass, and then that managed to pitch him sideways, presumably because he didn't realise he was anywhere near the grass, and that took Reed Sweeney, and a little bit of reversing onto the track as well as he was heading backwards down the side of the straight. I'd have preferred to have seen him do all he can to stay on the grass there.
So the incident with Timothy Swiggett, it looks like he also put wheels off on grass.
He clipped the grass. We're going to call that Nick Rowland luck, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
He could have been in literally any other position and let Timothy Swiggett have that accident on his own, but he had to be in that position and get involved.
Okay, so now we're trying to live action. Let's keep an eye here on James French, who is looking to prepare a move on Andrisco.
Absolutely all about the lead battle at the moment.
Alex
Andrisco
Slipsky
and French breaking. Go ahead.
Sorry, Alex Slipsky was in the top 10, and he's just come in for the fast repair. So I noticed he had a bent up front of the car, but that's been like that for a few laps. So he's obviously decided it's too bad and needed to come in.
Speaking of Alex's, Scott, Alex Gomes is up into P3. He's picked his way past Andre Azzolini. Drescher, I think, has maybe had an error, and he's dropped all the way back to 5th at the moment. Gomes there in 3rd, and it's Wes Duchak splitting them in 4th. James French is just within about a half a second there of Trevor Andrisco, certainly within the draft. And it's Mercedes from Audi as they work their way through the carousel. I think French has got pace on Andrisco here.
He didn't quite get the run through the carousel.
No, for sure. He's got pace, maybe not in the right places, but over the course of a lap, I think French is a little bit quicker than Andrisco, and at least while he's in the draft. So that may also be playing a role here, where maybe even if French gets past, he's not going to be able to pull much of a gap on Trevor. But for the moment, they run line of stern just just under 10 minutes into race 2.
It looks like there was another off track for Nick. Let's take a look at that replay. Oh, that's just running wide through the carousel. So that's usually when there's 3 incidents next to each other, it indicates something big. And maybe there was something big. There was something big for somebody. It might have been Fernando Matos. But go ahead, Scott.
Number 4, Matt Hart, who was running 12th at the start of the lap, as we see. Austin Olds now having an enormous crash out of the kink and taking 2 cars with him. I think it was David Cole and Fernando Matos.
We're going to watch that replay now.
Not the same luck he had in race 1 at exiting the kink here.
I think you're going to see something looking very familiar here. I think he's going to clip the grass. There you go on the exit, and unfortunately bounced up into the track and collects 2 more cars.
This is the iconic iRacing GT3 crash at the kink.
Yeah, iRacing any car crash at the kink, you see it in everything.
Right there.
Matt Hart from 12th place had a spin out of, and I've lost my track map, so I don't know which corner number that was. I think it was turn 7. Turn 7, the right-hand kink. That lost him a couple of places. He's now down. He's actually only down to 14th. It was he had a 2:23 lap last lap, so it lost him 15 seconds, but somehow only 2 places. Just shows the level of carnage that's been going on through the midfield of this pack.
Back up to the front of the field as Nick Rowland sets the fastest lap of the race, because of course he does. It's still Andrisco from French from Gomes. I think the dynamic that's beginning to develop here is that even if Andrisco isn't holding up French that much, Gomes is about to catch the back of French, and they are both going to hold Gomes up. We had talked a couple of times tonight about how Gomes needs these big point-scoring results. He's got plenty of time, and I think he's got enough pace to get both of the lead cars, the Mercedes of Andrisco and the Audi of James French, over the course of the remainder of the race. There's, I think, 8 laps to go here, and that's more than enough opportunities for Gomes, especially if it turns out that he's got a couple of tenths of pace left in reserve to try and get through those lead 2 before the end of the race. It's off for Jason Drescher up over the hill at turn 13, and he's going to see 2 or 3 positions there.
2 indeed, I think.
Recovered. Yeah, he's recovered well. There's no harm, no foul, just the 1X for the off track. But still, he was running well in 5th.
So going back to a point you made about 10 minutes ago, and we've had too much action since for me to be able to comment on it myself, but talking about how Nick Rowland can't afford bad races. Actually, he can afford one at this point in the championship, because he's only really had 1 bad round. The person who really can't afford a bad round is Reed Sweeney. So this, I believe he's running pretty low. He's
12th.
12th. Yeah, he's 12th now, sorry, on this lap. So that's
still ahead of Rowland.
Yes, but Rowland can drop this round because he's only had 1 bad race, and Reed Sweeney's had 2 bad races already. So actually,
let's consider though.
Hold on. This is all great gaming out, but we've really accordioned together here for first.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And to put a period on all of that, this is becoming a thing for Nick Rowland now, and we're going to have to keep an eye on it because these could be championship-defining moments. But anyway, back to the front of the field, as is quite right. Trevor Andrisco just barely holding on from James French, who gets a really nice run off of turn 8 and into the carousel, but not a typical passing zone, especially in these big GT3 cars. And he's going to have to settle into second, but it's allowed Alex Gomes right onto of the Audi R8 as they work their way through the kink, single file, 1, 2, 3, right to the apex. They're all neat and tidy on the exit. Down the back straightaway and headed towards Canada corner. Is James French going to be close enough to make a move? He thinks about it. He peeks the nose to the inside, and Driscoll holds him off again.
So I can add a little bit to our championship discussion. Reed Sweeney has just been disqualified, unfortunately. I think it's an iRacing automatic disqualification, so presumably he hit the incident point limit.
There is none?
There is none, so in that case he must have broken some other iRacing rule. It wasn't something the sanctioning body or the clerks on site laid down on him, so it must have been an automatic one.
Yeah,
as
we're going to have to
James
address
French
it.
Outside in turn 1 of Trevor Andriescu. Let's see if he can make the cutback. He can't. Didn't manage
No,
to
but it is. I'll tell you what. I think it held him up just enough that Gomes is going to have a look to the outside. French has to go defensive into the braking zone for turn 3. Gomes is on the more traditional line, and I think is going to get a little bit better launch down the long back straightaway and the run into the turn 5 braking zone. French has been really handicapped there from trying to make a run on Trevor Andriescu for the lead. But the big winner here could be Alex Gomes. He's got plenty of time to get through all this. He doesn't need to force the issue, but he does. Just releases the brakes and makes the pass on James French. P2 for Alex Gomes.
And now what James French is going to want to do here is just sit there in that position. Let Alex pull you back up to Trevor. There's no point in fighting this and letting Trevor run away without slipstream.
That's a great move there from Gomes. Just classic karting tactic of just parking on the apex, and if the guy wants to come through with any pace, he's going to have to run through you, which James French was sensible enough not to do. Good bit of trust there between the drivers, but yeah, really good move from Alex Gomes to gain.
It was a decisive move too, which is really important. Road America does very much lend itself to that, but in particular, he was on the brakes at an appropriate time. He didn't run on the back of James French, but he realized that he could get to the apex before French. If he just released the brake a little, slowed down his rate of deceleration, got to the inside, and then, like you said, just park it on the apex and force French to back off again and really seal the position.
We can go back to 4th place. It's Andre Azzolini making a dive on Wes Dushak, but he went far too deep into Canada corner, and Dushak managed to get the cut back. So he keeps 4th place and actually stretches his lead slightly on Azzolini.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Dushak has any pace here to try and bridge the gap up to the back of James French.
Look at the run that Gomes has.
We are quite close. Yeah, and this is going to be the changing moment here. I think Gomes is going to have the run up the front straightaway. Already, he's got the nose just alongside the left rear quarter of the number 99 of Trevor Andriescu, and with a wide line into turn 1, if Andriescu doesn't get too deep on the brakes here, Gomes could have this move done by the time they get to turn in. He does, but he stays wide anyway. And Andriescu is able to just run the pace through the apex. He's backed off to sit in the inside of Gomes. Gomes is going to have to stay wide, and they're going to touch. They're going to touch. Gomes goes around and is collected by James French.
James French helps correct him, and then there goes Dushak.
Yeah, Dushak and
Azzolini.
And Andrea Azzolini, who's gotten back through on Dushak. They're side by side now. The Mac Binarelli Mercedes to the right of the shot, and the Pride Audi to the left. They touch again in the braking zone for turn 5. And Azzolini is out over the curb, who's hit by James French. Gomes.
Yeah, meanwhile, Trevor Andriescu makes off like a bandit. He set this whole thing off, and he's just gone.
Yeah, I mean, you say he set the whole thing off. He missed the apex by maybe 20 or 30 centimeters, but unfortunately Gomes, for some reason, decided not to protect the inside, gave him the room to make that move, and then tried to squeeze him towards the apex. So really invited that kind of an issue. Not something that Gomes really needed to be doing in his situation as being one of the fastest cars in the race, but also his championship position, really. It's he could have put himself in a position where he was nowhere near as vulnerable, but chose not to.
Yeah, Gomes, I think, these corners at Road America, they're 90-degree corners, but they're not tight, hard right or left-handers. They're really kind of a wider radius. So you can sit on the outside and open up the apex if you are confident that you're going to have the run off the corner and out over the curb to be able to defend the position. And then anyway, even if you are side-by-side down the back straight, you have the advantage in the braking zone for the much, much tighter left-hander at turn 5. So I think Gomes, from a sort of a calculating position, might have thought that he was safe on the outside, even if Andriescu had a look. But all of that was predicated on Andriescu being able to get and stay at the apex to the corner. And like you said, 20 or 30 centimeters isn't a lot. I mean, it's a foot, right?
Yeah, to be honest,
just enough to tip Alex Gomes into that slide and then kick off the chaos down the back straight.
To be honest, I kind of thought that Gomes was maybe just ceding that position for the moment, assuming that he was going to be able to, basically repass him into 5. I wasn't even thinking about
another race-changing moment, Joseph. Not to interrupt, but a race-changing moment. Trevor Andriescu's been black flagged for setting off the chaos back there at turn 3.
I think that's the most correct decision.
It was harsh, but
it
not
was a mistake
wrong.
from Andrescu, but Gomes put himself in a position where he was vulnerable, which was unnecessary. But
I would agree with that.
If you want to apportion blame, Andrescu should have hit the apex in that position where he was trying to make a move down the inside. He didn't. So yeah, he deserves the blame.
Ironically, in the grand scheme of things that we've seen, over the course of the season this year, I think you could probably make a case that, again, relatively speaking, that's a racing incident. But the blame is there for Andrescu, and so it goes.
And then we saw the mess down at turn 5 as well, which was, in that case, it was caused by Azzolini really having no awareness of where James French was, having Azzolini being pushed wide in the corner by, I believe that was Alex Gomes. He then tried to cut back across and completely chopped off James French and took himself out there. So,
yeah, unfortunately, I can't shortcut us back to the turn 3 incident, but I'm jumping around a little bit because I've just noticed that Alex Gomes has gotten back around James French on this lap.
Yeah, Gomes still, he seems to have been really lucky to get away with no damage to his car, which it seems like a crapshoot with iRacing's damage model, unfortunately. But yeah, he got hit square in the right front wheel, and apparently that's fine. So yeah, he's still got pace. Trevor Andrescu, meanwhile, has come into the pits for his penalty, so Wes Dushak takes the lead, which is the first time we've seen...
The most unlikely winner out of this whole scenario is that 34 of Wes Dushak, and he's
worth reminding everyone that he's got their rookie license, so he's very new to iRacing. So
yeah, he's the highest running rookie by a mile, because the next one is McCoy in 10th.
Yeah, it's not. No, that's okay. This isn't it's not on merit from Wes Dushak, but he happened to be in the right place at the right time when everything sort of kicked off. And really, if you think about it, he was embroiled in the battle with Andrea Azzolini. That could have just as easily have been him. That's now sitting back in P6 where Azzolini is. Instead, he's come out of this as the leader with, admittedly, a very angry trio sitting behind him, Blake McCord, James French, and Alex Gomes.
Well, that goes back to Azzolini not driving in a manner in turn 5, which is sort of survival-oriented. He was driving, trying to make a pass, even when he'd been pushed wide, not taking the time to have any awareness of where other cars were around him, and ended up spinning. So that's why he's down in P6. I'm going to put a little bit of a period on the Reed Sweeney disqualification. Apparently he, and this is again going down to iRacing's odd damage model, apparently he had a meatball flag from the first lap crash. Yeah, but then also his car was fine. He was driving around at race speed. I don't understand how you can have a meatball flag when your car is at that pace. And he obviously didn't feel that he needed to serve it, didn't realise that you had to. Perhaps a driver who's not so experienced in iRacing that's the sort of thing you would have learned.
No, I think he's an E-license.
Right, so then he ended up doing 4 laps, which is more than you're allowed to do on a meatball flag, and the game disqualified him. So I guess you have to put it down to one of those things where you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and you need to learn the nuances of iRacing. But that's really unfortunate, because that's I've suffered from the same thing where I've been given a meatball flag for a car that is less than 1/10 of my fastest laps. Unfortunately, it's just one of those quirks you have to learn, and he's learned it the hard way here.
We've got first through fourth, basically line astern, within a second and a half of each other.
Right where I was headed next, Wes Dushak incidentally was given a warning for providing racing room. I don't know if that was to do with crowding Andrea Azzolini a little bit, or that was in the braking zone for turn 5, where it forced Azzolini out over the curb.
Note here, I think we're going to have a move into turn 5, because Wes has a little bit of front-end damage.
Yeah, and in any case, Gomes, in addition to being quicker, now has the slipstream all the way down the back straightaway, and this is where Gomes made the move a little earlier on James French. He doesn't do the same thing this time to Dushak, and I think that's smart, because he very clearly has pace over the 34 Mac Minarelli Mercedes, and he can sort of pick and choose where his best opportunity is going to be. He can't wait forever. There's only 4.5 minutes or so left in race 2 here for Road America. But he's got enough in hand that he can. Well, maybe he just waits for the mistake from Wes Duchek.
Yeah,
he
but
slides wide at turn 8.
he's not going to be able to capitalize around the carousel unless, of course,
He
can.
might, Joseph. I think he's going to have this done by the time they get to corner exit. He does. Power move around the outside of the carousel from Alex Gomes into the lead. He's going to hold up with Duchek through the kink a little bit, but I think that damage on the front end of the 34 that we see out the back of Alex Gomes is going to be just enough to sort of keep him at bay into the braking zone for Canada corner. The next question is going to be James French, and where he makes a move on Duchek is really deep. He's really deep. James French is wide. Here comes Blake McCord to driver's right as they work their way into turn 13. Now French is off rhythm, and it's cost him dearly. He's nowhere near the back of Wes Duchek's Mercedes.
Now, what's going to be really interesting is Wes. No, I don't think he will. He's already probably fallen out of the bulk of the slipstream. I don't think he's going to be able to hang on Gomez's tail.
Since the last corner, unfortunately, and it ended up having to miss the apex to make sure he missed running into the back of Alex Gomes, and that has cost him any chance of getting the slipstream down the front straight.
Yeah, he's going to have to be inch perfect through turn 1, and he's not wide again. Wide again. Here comes James French. He's got the run off turn 1, goes to the inside through 2, and into the braking zone at 3. And those 2 small errors at 14 and 1 have cost Duchek, who now gets the crossover and has a good run off of turn 3. But will he have the top? Well, I'll tell you, a bump draft will help. They go into the Sargento Bridge. Duchek he's got the ponies down the back straightaway to pull just along the right rear quarter of James French. He's better on the brakes for now, but he's on the curb, cuts it back to the apex, and they fall line astern up the hill. All this is allowing Alex Gomes to make his escape.
Ooh, very loose at the top of the hill.
It's James French wide at turn 6. Duchek is wide through the right-hander at 7, and Blake McCord is sitting there watching all of this with bated breath, waiting for something to happen. What's happened is James French jumped on the brakes extremely early for turn 8, and Duchek almost ran into the back of him again.
That's not French getting on the brakes early. As French goes extremely wide in the carousel, but he's going to cut back and
he's trying to diamond everything.
One of these 2 drivers is overdriving their car, possibly both, but definitely not neither.
Well, Wes Duchek, I've seen 3 or 4 times in the last lap just go far too deep on the braking zone. I'm waiting for him to run into the back of French.
There's damage to the back of French, and I wonder if that's hampering his straight line speed a little bit as well. And there goes Duchek. He spun on the brakes into Canada corner, and he's thrown himself into the gravel. He just clipped the side of James French to driver's right, and it sent him flying off into the gravel trap. And instead of being P2 or P3 at the end of this race, he's already slid back to 7th.
He was James French was wildly lucky to not get caught up in that.
Definitely,
extremely lucky. I think he got hit. I think there was contact there as French. He just got clipped by Wes Duchek, the spinning Wes Duchek. By that point, he had already lost control. But you're absolutely right. Extremely lucky not to be a part of it.
It was coming for a while. In fact, I was
Duchek
something similar down the previous straight. So yeah, Duchek was massively overdriving every braking zone, which is a real shame because he just didn't need to. He clearly had the pace to be in this fight. Needed to pick his moments a bit more carefully and make sure he was aware of the edge of the track, because he definitely just clipped the grass in the braking zone, which is what really caused that in the end. It's worth mentioning as well, Andrea Zalini he got past Racing Drescher on the previous lap, which would have been for 5th, but obviously Wes Duchek has promoted that battle to the battle for 4th, so Zalini in 4th now.
We've begun the final lap, race 2 from Road America. Alex Gomes works his way through turns 6 and 7, so about 2/3 of a lap to go. Just to take a peek back towards some of the other interests in the race, Nick Rowland has worked his way back into 9th in the number 67 Audi, just behind Wes Duchek, and I think with any luck, well, he might actually catch Duchek, depending on how bad Duchek's damage is. It might be another position for Rowland, but in sort of the head-to-head between Alex Gomes and Nick Rowland, this is going to come very, very much in Alex Gomes' favor, number 1. And number 2, if you're going to talk about damage control, I think Nick he's not got away with this, but if he can hold that top 10 there, that top 10 finishing position, it's going to be a lot better than it could or maybe should have been where we were standing at the end of lap 1.
We do want to find a battle on the last lap, it would be Trevor Andruscu recovering from his drive-through penalty to take 11th from Alex Lipsky. It's about 2 seconds a lap quicker.
Back to the front, it's Alex Gomes through the right-hander at turn 14 up the hill, and with 27 minutes of racing gone, the number 64 Mercedes of Alex Gomes is going to win race 2 of the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries from Road America. James French, after, well, being thrown everything during the course of the race tonight, is going to come home in second. Blake McCord third, Andrea Azzolini fourth for Audi. Fifth is Jason Drescher, Hugh North in sixth, whose name I'm not sure was called at all in the second race tonight. Wes Duchek is eighth behind Jonathan Patterson. Nick Rowland ninth.
Someone just thrown it off in front of Nick Rowland.
It was Vicent Clement, who, he's damaged and well down the order. So no position there for Nick Rowland, but he's going to finish ninth and salvage something of a disaster from the race tonight. Alex Slipsky and Trevor Andrusco is the battle we follow now. On board the 99 of Trevor. Slipsky goes wide. Trevor gets a really nice run off the corner. He's going to show his nose up the hill. It's going to be a Mercedes v Mercedes drag race, and I think Trevor's going to get this. They come up across the start-finish line, absolutely side by side. No, it's Slipsky. I think
wow,
Slipsky
by nothing, by 5/1000ths of a second.
I thought for sure that Trevor had the run coming off the corner there. He certainly had the head of steam headed up the hill, but it wasn't enough. Alex Slipsky was just able to pull back across the nose of the number 99 Mercedes, and your pole sitter is going to have to settle for 12th.
Alex did well either intentionally or unintentionally to, when he made that mistake, pull it close enough to the apex that Andrusco wasn't able to get that giant run. I mean, he should have had a tremendous run, but it just wasn't as sharp as it could have been.
Watching the last couple cars come across the start-finish line, Chance Kelly and Fernando Matos battling for 14th. I think Chance Kelly's got this. Matos has a decent run off the final corner, but he's going to run out of space. Question mark. Just. He falls just short.
And take that.
So
that was a lot.
That race, well, we'll sort through some of that here over the next couple of minutes. That race was not at all what I had expected it to be, for better or for worse.
That was what a chaotic first lap to just set everything in motion.
Yes, absolutely, and that you're right. To set it in motion is the right phrase, because it set up a whole dynamic in the battle for the lead that we otherwise wouldn't have seen. I mean, we watched everything take place with Alex Gomes, James French, and Trevor Andrusco. Wes Duchek became a part of it, at drivers that would never normally have been in the lead. And what we saw was a really fascinating battle of guys that weren't exactly inch perfect, but were able to sort of go back and forth in battles over the last 4 or 5 laps and really put on, more than anything, kind of a heck of a show.
So what I've gone back and looked at is we've got Blake McCord in third, which kind of piques my interest because he's a guy who won our craziest race of the championship so far at Lime Rock by quite a long way, doing something similar to what he did before today, which was coming through from the mid-pack and surviving. I've watched him through the first lap, and he had some close moments with Alex Gomes from turn 6 onwards, but through the first 3 or 4 corners, his goal seemed to be get as much space between me and any other car as possible, and sure enough, the entire pack in front of him, which included Reed Sweeney, Nick Rowland, and so on, all piled up together, and he had enough space around him to pick his way through cleanly. Got a bit of luck, obviously. Nick Rowland's famous for not having any. Like, he obviously still would have managed to get caught in something, but yeah. And then from there on, I mean, as I say, Blake McCord started behind those guys and has ended up third. We know that if Nick Rowland had managed to have a similar first lap with his pace, he would have won easily. We can say that, assuming all else being equal. So yeah, it's another great drive from Blake McCord that I wanted to pick out because he's making a habit of doing this through the season.
Yeah, we're starting to pick up a few people in the interview room, so I guess we'll let Brendan manage that. One of the things that I am really kind of, I guess the thing I want to point out, I don't know how explicitly you mentioned this, Scott, but Nick Rowland making it all the way up to 9th after basically getting hit by everything that moved, I think is pretty impressive.
It is, and obviously no more impressive than his pace through the first race. His best lap was on his last lap, and it was a 2:04.4, which is half a second quicker than his qualifying pole position, I believe. So yeah, obviously incredible pace from Nick, as we've seen before. But if we're talking about it in the context of the championship, he doesn't need 9th place finishes. That's the kind of result that I would expect a champion at the end of the season to drop. So that's kind of, sadly for him, and he did nothing necessarily wrong in this race. Just got taken out by a lot of bad driving by the drivers, a lot of bad luck for him, and he's ended up where he's ended up, despite obviously the kind of level he was operating at. At the same time, Blake McCord managed to pick his way through by allowing a little bit of extra room through those first 3 corners, not getting anywhere near any other cars where he could avoid it, and picking his way through that way. He had to slow right down, gave up a lot of time in the first lap, but it was that was enough to get him 3rd place in the end, despite his fastest lap being a full 2.2 seconds slower than Nick Rowland's fastest lap, who ended up 9th. So yeah, take from that what you will. Let's in this this field, it's more important to just make sure you absolutely survive at all costs, at least through the first lap.
Yeah, I guess it really shouldn't have been a surprise in hindsight that we got a lot more chaos with the non-qualifying grid. It wasn't even the reverse top 10 grid, although that shook things up a little bit. But I think the majority of it seemed to be just the fact that people were in different positions based off of the chaos from round 1, right? It was just that kind of chaos spilling over, and people maybe not starting where we would have expected them if we'd done gridding on raw pace.
Incidentally, talking about sort of the survival methods necessary to get through some of the more chaotic races in the USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries, we've already been singing the praises of Blake McCord, who finished 3rd tonight and did rack up a win earlier on in the season, like Scott had mentioned. We have Blake McCord with us, who has just been unmuted. Blake, it's a run to the podium for a race 2. It's not so bad.
Hey guys, it was a great race. Wasn't very happy after that first one, but yeah, everything came to it in the second, fortunately.
Yeah, Scott had mentioned just a minute ago that it seemed like your approach to lap 1 was just create as much space between you and every other car as possible, so that when the inevitable happened down the back straightaway, you had room to sort of pick your way through the carnage, and obviously that paid off.
Yeah, I mean, I generally try to take it a little easy on lap 1. I mean, mostly so I'm not the one taking out guys in front of me, but unfortunately, this first race and at Laguna Seca kind of hurt me, dropping back a little because it put me in bad position. But, I mean, this one, it wasn't, I think whoever it was, they apologized, so it was nice. I mean, it wasn't their fault. They just missed their braking area. But big disappointment because I was definitely hoping for more in race 1.
Yeah, so these race 2 results you seem to be racking up, whether it's by happy accident just through survival or whether you've had pace or whatever. Is that enough to make up for the disappointments of race 1, or do you just kind of sit there and chuckle that, hey, this is what could have been, and maybe we can do better, in race 1 next week?
I'll take a 3rd place behind Alex Gomes and James French for sure. So that makes up for the first one, I'd say.
That's not something to sneeze at, and certainly something you can hang your hat on. You finished 2nd behind James French, and you've already got a win on the season, so not a bad run so far, all things considered. Appreciate you joining us, Blake, tonight, and again, congratulations on your podium.
Thanks, guys. Great broadcast as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Blake. Really appreciate it. I think we've got Nikita Ponners here as well, making a habit of this. Well, maybe not. I've unmuted him, but he's still muted. So we'll wait for him to reach back out here and see what's... Oh, there he is. Nikita, you're with us?
Yep, I got you guys.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, huh?
Yeah, I had 2 races not going too much the way I wanted them to go.
Yeah, so we're coming to grips with the Audi, obviously here. Road America is a little more open than Lime Rock and Laguna Seca like we've had through the last couple of weeks. But you seem to be on an apology tour here at the moment. What went on?
Yeah, so let's just start with that second race. On the start there, we got going, and then there was a big checkup, so it was a kind of freak out moment for, I guess it had to be for everyone. And we just got going, and going into turn 1, I went to the inside line, and I was right behind, I forget who it was, but they started to slow down, and didn't expect it and just messed up. I clipped the grass and just spun it in front, and then like the freak out moment I had, I tried to go into first as fast as possible and just put in reverse by accident. Just it backed it up into everyone, and I got a well-deserved black flag for it, but we try to keep our head up.
Your race director, Jason Bird, just conveniently clearing his throat there, as you mentioned. You're throwing it into reverse prior to turn 1. But these things will happen in racing. Obviously, like you said, you do the crime, you do the time, and it was more of a struggle for you this time around. Usually, we sit here and chat with you, finding your way into the top 10 after the second race. But seeing the lower side of racing, I guess, tonight.
Yeah, mistakes are made. It was just a bad one, and I'm sorry whoever it cost. It was just a bad mistake on my part.
Well, appreciate you joining us, Nikita, and certainly appreciate ownership of incidents. It's not particularly common amongst racers, but it's given the chaos we've seen in the first lap here, you're not the only one, and it's not unusual to have seen during our race twos in particular here. So thanks for joining us here after the race, and we'll look forward to doing this again next week at Road Atlanta.
Thank you, guys, and good job on the broadcast.
We appreciate it. Anybody else who's interested in having a chat here? We've got a few more minutes before we wrap things up from Road America. You're welcome to post here in the Discord or send me a message. And we'll think we might be able to get to Alex Slipsky. Give me a minute. Alex, you're with us? Alex Slipsky? Maybe. Not just at the moment. So he's unmuted. He can join us in a second, but we'll wait to hear from Alex, who I think had a particularly eventful or unique race 1. Go ahead, Joseph.
Hello.
Alex is with
Hey,
us.
guys. Sorry.
Fantastic. Yeah, no worries. Your race 1, Alex. Let's have a chat about that.
Yeah, it was a fun one. I mean, I was super happy to kind of I don't remember where I started, but I think I started 9th, which I was happy about. And then people kind of just fell away in front of me, and I ended up in 5th. And I had a really, really good back and forth with, I don't remember his name, but he was in the Ben & Jerry's Mercedes. And we had a good battle there. And then I think French caught us towards the end, and I kind of lost it on the exit of coming into the carousel, which I was not very happy about, but I don't know if it really mattered in the end, as I coasted my way to 100 feet before the finish line. So,
I remember sort of that moment in race 1 where watching you do battle there inside the top 10 and thinking that if nothing else, as Nick Rowland was running away at the front of the field, there was some really excellent racecraft on display with so many evenly matched cars. And yours in particular was really, really fun to watch, the way you were setting up passes, defending in the braking zones. It was all really, really impressive, and kind of got to put that all on display there in race 1.
yeah, thanks. I mean, there was kind of a pack of us. Like, there was the guys up at the top in like the 205s, and I think Roland did like a 204, but there was a big group of us. I remember in qualifying that were like there was like a 207-3 and then 4 guys in the 207-4s. And I think that was where a lot of that good racing ended up happening.
Anything in particular from race 2 that stands out?
Made it through my share of giant wrecks in front of me. I got damage in the second one. 2 cars did like a slow motion pirouette in front of me through the kink, and I made it past the first one, but not the second one. So I tried run with it a little while, and then I had to pit because I couldn't see the apex of right-handers because my bodywork was so damaged. But kind of worked my way back up. And then the finish with Andrusko there was pretty exciting. I can't believe the run he got out of the last corner there, and it was, what, 0.005 seconds at the line, I think? So
I think so. I thought for sure, I was on the call as you were coming up the hill, I thought for sure he had just enough steam and run off the corner to get you at the line, but then it looked like maybe like just as you crested the hill, you were able to pull back in front, and like you said, I think 0.005 of a second was the margin across the line. It was a lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to call, and a nice little way to wrap up the night.
yeah, definitely. Thanks, guys.
Yep, thanks, Alex. Really appreciate you coming on afterwards here. We'll start wrapping things up. If anybody else wants to have a chat, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, Scott and/or Joseph, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a real shame that race 2 started the way it did. I think it felt like it set the tone. And I kind of have gone back through replays, and yeah, there was really only 2 big, well, 3 I suppose, big issues. There was Nikita, who's owned up to his mistake, and that's one of those things that happens when you're. He did a pretty good job of making sure that he got slowed down when he was surprised by the driver in front of him. I think it was the BMW, and I'm blanking on. I think it's David Cole in the BMW. Surprised him on the brakes, and he ended up getting on the grass and causing a big issue. The other one, unfortunately, the issue that took out a lot of our leaders was just Matt Hart in turn 3 missing his braking zone and ending up getting squirrely and just being run over, unfortunately, as he tried to collect himself. That is, I mean,
It's just
Matt
one of those
Hart
things.
it is, but it's also Matt Hart was up there because of the reverse grid.
Yeah.
He was starting second. We'll forgive him for not knowing starting procedures. I'm not sure what the deal was with the jump. Luckily, everyone pretty much actually got away with that. As I look through the replays, that would, on almost every iRacing official race server I've ever seen, that would have caused a 30-car pileup. But somehow everyone was patient enough to get back in line, and we got away with that at the start. But then, yeah, unfortunately, Matt just kind of lost it on his own, and then just got run over by the faster cars coming up behind him, who were sort of somewhat impatient, trying to make their way through, as you do when you're starting 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th in a reverse grid top 10. And yeah, he was put in a difficult position that perhaps wasn't something that he was ready to handle in iRacing. So that caused the big stack up at turn 3. So it's a shame that happened, because we saw in race 1 how much high quality racing you can get when we get things underway and everyone finds someone their own pace and ability to battle with. And we had a really great race 1. Some highlights of race 2, but unfortunately a little bit more carnage than I think we would have liked.
I think somebody with maybe the most highlights over the course of our 2 races tonight, Alex Gomes, finally have the opportunity to have a chat for the first time this season. Alex, it's a pretty solid night for you. We'll discuss the goings-on of race 2 here in a moment, but race 1, you're P2 behind Nick Rowland, and all things considered, that wasn't a bad start to the night.
No, not a bad start at all. How you guys doing tonight?
All right. Much better now. It was really entertaining racing, especially there towards the end. That was really, really fun to watch.
Yeah. So, race 1, I think, went pretty good in my favor. I was able to just keep things clean, and some other guys here and there fell off. I felt really bad for Reed, who was running second, and then ended up getting a little sideways, and I got about 5 seconds ahead of him because of it. And yeah, I was pretty happy with second place, just seeing as I didn't really make any mistakes myself. I mean, small mistakes, sure, but no major offs, nothing like that. And then race 2 has to be the nuttiest race that I've ever won.
For a while there, it didn't look like it was really even in the cards. I mean, you sort of stalked the lead duo. Trevor was running really well, and then all of a sudden there, it seemed like maybe 6 or 8 minutes to go, the whole thing exploded.
Yeah, the whole thing exploded is right. I just watched the replay between me and Trevor going into turn 2 where he got into me there, and it was very close. I would say maybe he did come up into me a little bit, but that maybe could have been a racing incident. I was a little surprised to see him get the black flag, but also, kind of like, all right. Because maybe I have a chance to come back here and actually do something. Because I knew I was faster than Wes. And I had been faster than Andre, I believe, who was in the Audi. And then it's funny, we had our little moment in turn 2, and then once again in turn 3, the left-hander, we got bunched up again, and I had some more contact. And I know it doesn't show it visually on the car, but from that incident on, I had suspension damage, and like going down the straightaways, my wheel was like 45 degrees to the right, and I was like, "There's no way." But as much as the steering was out of whack, it felt like the car was actually still handling like it was, just with offset steering. So I think that's what kept me in the game. I wasn't doing the kind of laps I could have been doing, but it was fast enough to get back up there, challenge Wes when he had the lead, and I think I forget what happened exactly, but I think he made a small slip. Yeah, he made a small slip up before the carousel there, and I was able to capitalize on it.
Yeah, it looked to the outside viewer like maybe he was just overdriving the car a little bit on the way into the braking zones, and if you were being a little more conservative, which obviously you would have to be with a little bit of damage, you were able to sort of pick him off and get through into the lead. These race twos seem to be a little bit more chaotic, and I'm sure a little bit that has to do a little bit with the top 10 invert. We've seen the race ones. Okay, if you've got pace and you can be consistent, you can kind of run away with a decent victory. We saw Nick do that tonight. These race twos are turning it a little bit more into survival races, again, for better or for worse. Are you aware sort of what's going on in these race twos, particularly tonight with what happened with Nick earlier on? I know we're early days in the championship, but does that sort of play into your racecraft and race strategy as you work your way through, particularly the second races?
Yeah, absolutely. Through the second races, I'll pay attention when the wrecks. I mean, all the wrecks in the second races have tended to happen right in front of me. And I don't know who gets caught up and who gets through until about a lap later. I'll ignore it for a few laps, and then when I can get some time to actually go through my black boxes and see who is where, that's when I'll start putting it together. Like, hey, wait a minute. I mean, like for example, this race, Nick and Reed were my biggest rivals from race 1, and I looked about lap 3 at the F3 box and saw that they were nowhere around, and I was like, wait a minute, I could be the fastest guy in this top 5 right now. So, yeah, I try not to pay attention initially, sure. But then when I can have a break to actually, catch my mind a bit, then I'll take a look and see what's going on. I try not to do it too much, though, because you can psych yourself out. But I was able to hold it together as best as I could today.
And obviously it worked out pretty well for you. Just to wrap things up here, we sort of started talking championship tonight. This is past the halfway point. We're 6 races in out of 10. 2 more rounds to go, Road Atlanta and then Indianapolis to round out the season. Are you thinking championship at the moment? Are you thinking points and title race? Because tonight was certainly a big night for you relative to everything that happened with Nick. Or is this just about going out trying to pick up race wins and get what you can out of the season?
Well, given my current championship position, I'm definitely thinking about it. I don't think I'm the fastest guy here on raw pace. I think that would go to, Nick, I think he's been a second faster than us all week for some reason. I mean, I was 3rd fastest in practice. Reed was a few tenths ahead of me, but then he ended up, what was he doing, a 2:04.8 in practice, and he repeated it in qualifying, and then I think Reed could do a 2:05.6, and I could get around that as well, but it seems like the race twos are really kind of the jokers, where you have to pay attention and try to just survive more than anything. And I think that's kind of where I've been doing okay, not perfect. I've been in a few race 2 wrecks so far this season, but I've obviously been the most consistent given my points tally. So if I can just keep that up, maybe I won't need super raw pace to take home the championship. Not that I don't want to go fast, but it seems to be working for me so far.
That was exactly what we had pointed out at the top of the broadcast, was rock solid consistency across the season, top 3, top 4, almost every race, but it was going to take a couple of big finishes and big points races to keep you in contention moving forward with the rest of the season, and tonight's obviously gone a long way to doing that. So appreciate you coming by, Alex. Thanks for chatting with us, and really congratulations on both races tonight.
Yes, thank you, gents, and thanks again for the broadcast. And shout out to my sponsor, Black Glove Courier Services.
Appreciate it, Alex. Thanks for joining us, and we'll keep doing this during the rest of the season if you're happy to come back and join us. We'll do one more, I think, with Matt Hart, who I have to unmute, and I've done that now. Good evening, Matt.
Hey, how are you?
Not so bad. Thanks for joining us. That was all right for a couple corners, at least, in race 2, right?
Well, so I kind of just wanted to take a moment and apologize. It was totally my fault. Like you guys were saying, I was not anticipating starting in second there and really didn't know when to start, so I just kind of gunned it from when I gunned it in the previous race further back in the field. So that, and like you said, I lost it and actually downshifted too early. Started to spin on me, and then, like you said, I was just getting run over. And somehow I made it out and was running 13th for a while, but just lost focus too many times.
It comes with, I think, sort of this. It comes with sim racing, really. And it was interesting that start to race 2 in particular. We saw you take off up the hill, and then sort of accordion back to the field, and it looked like it had all more or less sorted itself out by the time you got back to turn 1. That once you were into the braking zone, everything was, pretty well straightforward, and maybe you cost a little bit of time to the left lane at the green flag, but ultimately it wasn't going to cause any big stack ups, and then all of a sudden all hell broke loose behind you.
Well, so I was in second, and I didn't know. I obviously jumped it way too early, so I didn't want to take the advantage of that. So I was trying to back off while also looking in the rearview mirror to make sure I wasn't getting in too many people's way. I think it was, like you said, maybe a little bit, but yeah. So that what is that, turn 3? I was loose in that corner on the first lap every time in practice and even restarts, but I just wanted to take a minute and apologize to everybody for that.
No, appreciate it. And again, if nothing else, we've seen a lot of chaos this season, some kind of bizarre incidents, but ultimately everybody has been sporting throughout this process and certainly competitive, but willing to come forward and acknowledge, and own up to their mistakes and the incidents. And you can't ask for much more than that. So appreciate you joining us, Matt. And we'll hopefully get to talk to you again sometime before the end of the season.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it. Scott, we've had some closing thoughts from you already as we head towards 9:45 here. Joseph, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think Matt actually makes a really good point, which is if you look to the timing tower to the left of our screen, which is for some reason stopped paging through, you see a lot of orange and red numbers, and what that means is you've got a lot of people in this series who are running D licenses or rookie licenses. So this is all very new to a lot of people. With that in mind, I mean, you see them mixing up with people who are, with these blue numbers. Now, obviously, a lot of those blue numbers, those A licenses, got caught up in other stuff today in the second race. But when you see that we've got that kind of variety with kind of experience levels, not necessarily skill levels, but definitely experience levels, it's been cool to kind of watch people progress. I think that's the most interesting thing, even though we do still get those races where the first half is just total chaos. I think it all feels like incremental progress.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, you and I and Scott, all three of us, as part of the DriversEye Live crew, have started in sim racing. We've met each other and known each other through sim racing. We've been at this for 15 years, and we branched out into doing some real race broadcasts. We've been a part of the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando for the last 2 years, and watching real world drivers, karting drivers, and car drivers alike sort of enter the sim racing world and watch that level of development.
Baffling.
It really is, and it's not to say that it's substandard or anything, because everybody goes through this process, but it is different than real racing. The sensations are different, the approaches are different, and even though some race tactics might transfer over and racecraft might transfer over, it's still a learning process for everybody to get trustworthy with each other on track, to learn how close you can push contact boxes, that sort of thing. It's been really fun.
Latency. Network latency is the thing that you just never. That's nothing that never shows up in a real car, right? So you've got to give yourself that buffer that you wouldn't have to. There's all these little things. There's all these little pieces that just change your experience, and it's just one thing that you've got to adjust to after another.
Yeah, and one thing that I've come across with my Volkenhorst Motorsport teammates, who are all real racing drivers who are coming over to sim racing, at least for this break during the coronavirus pandemic, is that one of the main things they've all stressed to me is that how weird it is having nerves at the start of the race, but no adrenaline to sort of get rid of, sort of pump that through. So you end up sitting there because there's no sort of, well, a much less physical element to sim racing as real life racing. You end up just sort of stewing in your own nerves as you go through the first lap, and you have to sort of get through it by just getting yourself into the race, and that's so much harder, they find, in sim racing. I don't know how much that applies to these guys running a much lower pressure championship than what we compete in sim racing, but it's still, a first lap is a first lap and a race is a race. And someone like Matt Hart, who's been dropped into second place, starting second on the grid,
You've got 34 people behind you.
yeah, and the 8 guys right behind you are obviously faster from race 1 because they finished ahead of you.
Yeah.
So I can see that being something that's really hard to get used to. Obviously, the 3 of us maybe, I think we can relate to it, but it's a little bit less of a thing for us because we're the opposite, where we've done the vast majority of our racing in sim racing.
Oh,
Yeah.
I told you about, this is a little inside baseball, but a few weeks back, the IndyCar series on iRacing, the official IndyCar series, ran at the Nordschleife, and I took the start from the pit lane because I was like, I've maybe done a half lap of practice in this car combination, and I refused to take out the entire field. I totally get having those nerves. I still get those nerves, and like Brendan says, I've been doing this for the better part of a decade and a half, which is horrifying in itself. But it really is like, it's something that, you know, I think it was said either during the IndyCar on NBC or NASCAR on Fox broadcast, where the competition is real. It's a real thing, even though the cars are fake and the collisions are fake and they're much less expensive. The nerves of having to fight 37 other people still gets to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, at the end of the day, a race is a race, right? It's still a competition. You still have goals, and you still put time and effort into the practicing and setup development in some cases. And ultimately, once you get things going, like you say, it's real nerves, it's real energy, and it's real effort that gets poured into it. And whether we're standing in the booth at Orlando or we've been at Thunderhill in the past, or whatever we happen to be watching, it's the same sort of energy sitting here behind the computer desk, either participating in or commentating on, like we've had the good grace to do over the last couple of weeks. These 30-minute sprints. It's been a real joy for me to watch and be a part of the development of the series, development of the drivers, and I look forward to this continuing and being a part of the dynamic of USAC karting moving forward, because this is now sort of an inextricable part of the history of this culture. And it's been really, really fun to watch, and the races have been thoroughly entertaining for both very good and very questionable reasons.
They've definitely been interesting.
Yes, very much so. So with that, we're past 9:45 now. We've been at this for a couple, almost 3 hours. We've heard from a good share of the drivers. Alex Gomes, race winner from race 2 tonight, and second, I think, in race 1. Potentially your championship leader, leaving tonight. We'll wait for TJ to post the results on the SimCraft 24 Hours of Orlando Facebook page. But with all that having been said, Joseph and Scott, if you don't have anything else.
No, thank you.
Very good. We will wrap it up from Road America. DriversEye Live with myself, Brendan Kazmarek, Joseph Mudrak, and Scott Michaels have joined me all night. We head to Road Atlanta next week, next Wednesday night, 7:15 for the broadcast on DriversEye, and then Indianapolis to round out the season. Afterwards, 2 more rounds, 4 more races, and about 2 hours of racing to go until we get to the conclusion of our USACkarting.com Invitational eSeries. Happy to have your company all night tonight. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we look forward to doing this again the same time next week. Enjoy your night.